Chapter 309. What kind of person was the king of Luoya City? Xiao Xian had not seen him since he came to Luoya City. He rarely learned more from other people. What he knew was what everyone knew. Before Xiao Xian separated from Xueqi, what he said to him was actually the weakness of the quicksand beast. The Yanjiao people lived in the ferocious beast mountain forest, which Xueqi knew. He also felt that the reason why Xiao Xian could say the weakness of the quicksand beast was probably because he often came into contact with the beast. As for Xiao Xian, he did not have much doubt. Even if he did, he would not ask. The two sides were in a cooperative relationship, so as long as it was beneficial to everyone, it was fine. As for other secrets, what harm was there in not mentioning it? Xueqi intended to give the quicksand beast as one of his birthday gifts to the Luoya City king, plus the stone that Xueqi liked very much. In Xueqi's view, it was already a very good gift. However, in order to get more chips, Xiao Xian told Xueqi about the weakness of the quicksand beast. This could also be sent as one of his birthday gifts, even more important than the quicksand beast. After all, the cost of killing a quicksand beast was too high. Knowing the weakness and then hunting it was different. The slave owners of Luoya City already knew how to lure out a quicksand beast, and Xiao Xian's information could undoubtedly reduce the consumption to a large extent. As for whether the Luoya City king would attribute the abnormality of the quicksand beast to Xiao Xian's group, Xueqi had to solve it. After returning to his residence in the city, Xiao Xian carefully recalled the abnormality after the appearance of the quicksand beast. Based on his years of hunting experience, the quicksand beast seemed to have been angered. It was not necessarily the second young master's people, but someone else. Moreover, the timing was just right. It had a feeling of luring the tiger away from the mountain. As soon as the oasis guards left, the quicksand beast arrived. Was it really a coincidence? Xiao Xian did not think so. Thinking of what Ai Shi had said before, Xiao Xian couldn't help but think of Dao Yu, who was said to be a slave in Baisha City. Putting aside other things, Dao Yu, this person, was ruthless and merciless. Xiao Xian was not worried. What he was afraid of was that he was not only ruthless, but also scheming. He was a great threat to the Flaming Horns tribe. The next day, Xueqi came to the Yanjiao embassy to find Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian looked at the third young master of the turtle clan. Although he looked tired and exhausted, his eyes were filled with joy. "It seems that things are going well," Xiao Xian said. Yes. Xueqi did not elaborate on what happened after entering the palace, but he told Xiao Xian that his second brother was criticized by the Luoya king. Several of the slaves who led the quicksand beast to the oasis were also executed. Xueqi, however, was rewarded for his good gift. The benefits that were previously reduced were all made up for. Xueqi proposed a group of slaves who had not recognized their masters, and the Luoya king agreed after being surprised. What is the reason for the quicksand beast's madness? Have you found out? Xiao Xian asked. I heard from the oasis guards who tracked the suspicious characters that it may be the Baisha people who did it. I just don't know how they made the quicksand beast crazy. When Su Li's slaves were trapping and hunting the quicksand beast, they were also interfered with. They failed and suffered heavy losses. However, my father said that a failure is a failure, and there is no excuse. So he let Su Li reflect this time. Is it related to Dao Yu? Xiao Xian asked. I don't know. Xueqi told the truth. His own manpower was limited, and he could not inquire more. However, what you said about the weakness of the quicksand beast made my father very happy. If we didn't know the weakness of the quicksand beast, we would have to worry about the Baisha people bringing more crazy quicksand beasts to cause trouble. But now that we know, my father hopes that there will be a few more so that we can kill more. My father wants to use the quicksand beast to make clothes and new crowns. Speaking of this, Xueqi's smile widened. My father agreed to let me follow. I grew up so big, but I followed when I was very young. Because he did not have his own slaves, Xueqi had been excluded from the big events. In the annual Beast City gathering in the desert, the eldest young master Xueqi and the second young master Su Lu took turns to follow. Now, Xueqi got such an opportunity. I also said your things. When the time comes, you will go with me, Xueqi said. This was indeed good news for Xiao Xian. Have you picked the slaves? Xiao Xian asked. My father allowed me to pick 20. This batch of slaves has been picked. He said to wait for the next batch of slaves to come, and then let me continue to pick. Xueqi excitedly said. The enslavement is complete? Xian asked. When it came to enslavement, Xueqi's excited look was slightly restrained. I enslaved 3, but only succeeded in 1. If the enslavement failed, they would die. Xian knew that, so he did not ask about the other 2 slaves. Xueqi's face was full of ridicule. He didn't know if it was self-deprecating or ridiculing others. You don't know that when I went to pick the slaves, those slaves seemed to see death. It seemed that the people I picked would die. When Xueqi appeared, those people seemed to see hope. Bang! With a tisk, one could tell that the 3rd young master was very dissatisfied with the slaves' reactions, and the reality was also a blow to him. Although 1 out of 3 succeeded, compared to the 90% success rate of the others, he was really not good enough. I'll practice again. Xueqi began to spontaneously mobilize the power in his body. The palm of his outstretched hand sprang up with a blue flame. Xian looked at Xueqi, who had already entered the state of training. He did not disturb him, but observed the flame that appeared again in his mind. That was Xueqi's flame. The boundary between red and blue in the flame was very clear. The 2 flames gathered together and intertwined with each other. When Xueqi was training the enslavement, the blue flame in the flame was unusually active. Xueqi could get benefits from Xian, and Xian could also get benefits. The most direct reaction was that there were more blue flames in the totem flame belonging to Yanjiao. After half a day, at the end of the practice, Xueqi felt that his enslavement power was more skillful. He believed that when he went back to enslavement today, it would be smoother, and he could successfully enslave more people. After the ability is locked, the slave's promotion is limited? Xian asked. Basically that's the case. Xueqi said. Is there an exception? It is said that there are some but very few. Those who can break through the shackles must be very terrible. Xueqi said. After Xueqi left, Xian mobilized the totem power in his body. The dark flame-like lines had passed 2/3 of the forearm, closer to the wrist. Before leaving the tribe, the totem lines on Xian's arm showed that there were not so many. However, after experiencing the Rain tribe in here, the totem lines went 1 step further. For Yanjiao's totem warriors, the display of the totem lines was the most direct proof of their strength. The totem lines on the arm over the elbow belonged to the intermediate totem warriors. The closer it was to the wrist, the closer it was to the senior totem warriors. Xian, there are changes in the other tribes. Tua came in and said. Xian and the other 2 in the city also always paid attention to the movements of the other tribes. Some time ago, these tribes led teams out of the city from time to time. It was said that they went to the desert to gain experience and came back a few days later. This time, it seemed that the movement was bigger. Those people are leaving one after another. Lei told Xian about his discovery today. Yesterday, the people in the city came back and were packing up. I also saw someone rushing to make new stone tools. I thought it was time for the long journey and we have to go back, but in fact, it is not the case. Today, the Tian Shan tribe and the Thousand Masks tribe left the city. The other tribes also seem to be preparing to leave. I heard that the Hui tribe will go out of the city in 2 days, but not to go back. They are going to the desert. Xian, where do you think they are going? If they wanted to end the long journey and return to the tribe, they should inform the people in Yanjiao. Where were these people going in the end? What happened in the desert recently? Xian thought about it and only thought of one thing. Beast City. It was the annual carnival of the slave owners. All the big slave owners who were willing to participate would take people to the Beast City. The rest of the tribe might want to take this opportunity to do something, which might be related to the things that those people were hiding. Xian thought about it in his heart and said to Lei and Tua, no matter how the other tribes are arranged, we have to prepare. After the Luoye City King's birthday, we have to set off for Beast City. Chapter 310. The birthday of Luoye City's big slave owner, Luoye City King Su Luan, was very lively. On that day, Xian did not go out of the house, because it would be more troublesome if he went out. On this day, the whole city celebrated. Even if they could not laugh, they had to laugh. Even if they could not celebrate, they had to bite the bullet to celebrate. The other slave owners in the city would be carried around the city, scattering things. Sometimes it was shell money, and sometimes it was other things, such as food. This was a gift from the king. The slaves who encountered these situations would gratefully kneel on the ground. Looking around, there was a large group of people kneeling. Xiao Xian did not want to stand out from the crowd. In the past few days, people in the tribal area left the city one after another. It seemed that the previous departure was really just training. This time, Xiao Xian could feel the dignified atmosphere from them. When they first came over, those young and frivolous warriors had now become a lot calmer, with more murderous aura in their behavior. Before they left, they did not say anything to the three people from Yanjiao. They only let Xiao Xian and the other two wait in the city. When they all came back, it was time to leave and return to the tribe. However, these people did not know that Xiao Xian and the other two would follow Xueqi to Beast City. The two moons in the sky were getting closer and closer, beginning to change into a full moon. The desert at night had a layer of silver-white light. Standing at a high place and looking into the distance, one could often see the shadows of some nocturnal beasts in the desert outside the city. Lei and Tua walked into Xiao Xian's house and said, "Everything is ready." Tomorrow they would leave the city. Tonight, they had to get everything ready and leave at any time tomorrow. These 3 cloth clothes were sent by Xueqi's people today. You each take one. Xiao Xian pointed to the 3 long cloth coats next to him, still in the style of a hood. This was what Xiao Xian asked Xueqi to find someone to make. The color of the cloth was dark and very low-key. However, the material was not the kind worn by the slaves, but Xueqi's stock. Lei and Tua were seeing such clothes for the first time and felt very novel. By the way, Xian, what about that camel? Lei asked. If the camel was left in the city, Xueqi could find someone to help look after it, but it was not safe. Who knew when someone would come out and slaughter the camel? Especially Xueqi's second brother, who now looked at the eyes of the 3 people in Yanjiao, was not very good. It's going with us, Xiao Xian said, then added, it chose to go with us. Speaking of this, Xiao Xian also felt that it was funny. During the day, he had asked Mud whether it would leave with them or stay here. Mud took a few steps forward, which meant that it was telling Xiao Xian that it chose to leave with him. The next day. Early in the morning, the loud and clear sound of the bone horn resounded throughout the city. The city, which was usually quiet at this time, was now filled with the sounds of people running. Other than the human voices, there were also the roars of beasts. This morning was destined not to be quiet. When the sun came out, Xiao Xian and the other two took the camel and left with the people sent by Xueqi. Outside, some slaves in leather armor had lined up and stood on the main road in the city. These people were different from the ordinary slaves in the city. They were all used to guard the army. A strange-looking beast was led out by the senior slaves. It opened its bloody mouth and roared at the others around it, as if it was going to rush over and bite them. Bang, bang, bang. Heavy footsteps sounded at the end of the road. A beast nearly 8 meters high came over. It looked a bit like a lizard, with a thick layer of cuticle covering its body with stripes. After a few steps, it would reveal a forked tongue. Such a beast served as a sedan bearer, carrying the king of Luoya City on its back. Behind the giant beast, there were several slave owners who followed. They were riding their own domesticated beasts, but their size was much smaller than the king's. Xueqi rode on a beast that looked like a hyena. He waved to Xiao Xian and the other two, motioning them to follow. Next to him, there were 3 camels, prepared for Xiao Xian and the other two. Xiao Xian was leading one, while Lei and Tua turned over and rode on the other 2 camels. In the traveling team, the slaves were all on foot. Only the slave owners could ride their beasts. Xiao Xian and the other 2 were special. They were not slaves, nor did they belong to the slave owners. However, they did not have to run like the slaves, so Xueqi got 3 camels. Xiao Xian turned over and rode the camel. He felt the attention of a line of sight. He looked sideways and saw a young man with a calm face. The man looked similar to Xiao Xian, but at this moment, the cold light in his eyes crossed the surrounding crowd and fell straight on Xiao Xian. Sulu? The second young master of Luoya City? Also, because of the oasis, the second young master put all his resentment on Xiao Xian and the other 2. Originally, he should have followed the Luoya City king to the Beast City, but because of Xueqi's treasure, plus the oasis, he was ordered to defend the city with the eldest young master Xueqi. Naturally, his heart was not happy. Xiao Xian asked Xueqi, after the Luoya City king left with the team, would the young masters in the city take the opportunity to seize the throne? Xueqi's answer was, they did not dare. In addition to most of the slaves in the city belonging to the king, there was also the factor of strength. They were afraid of the Luoya City king Su Luan. Before they had enough strength, They would not dare to usurp the throne. Xian took back his line of sight and looked at Xueqi in front of him. Xueqi successfully enslaved 14 slaves. This time, he brought them with him, probably to observe these people. In addition to Wu Shi, who was still with him, Xueqi brought a total of 15 slaves this time. A guard next to him had a ferocious face when facing the other slaves on the street. But when he turned around and looked at Xueqi, the aloof expression on his face suddenly converged. He trotted over and handed over a plate of fruit. The compliments were skillfully spoken out with a flattering smile on his face. If it was before, Xueqi would not receive such treatment. Even if the slaves remained respectful to Xueqi, they would not be so courteous. Now it was different. Xueqi, the third young master, was able to successfully enslave and have his own slaves. He was also taken by the king to the beast city, so the other people's attitudes were naturally different. Xueqi casually picked a fruit and looked at the city gate in front of him. He exhaled a long breath and stabilized his excited mood. After the king's team left the city, Sulu could no longer suppress his inner anger. He went back and smashed all the things in the house. However, the people in the city did not care so much. At least, Xueqi and Xian's mood was very good. Beast City was a little far from Luoye City. Speaking of Beast City, it was a relatively special place in the desert. Because although it was a desert, the weather was different from other places in the desert. It was much cooler than other places, and the temperature was low. After all, the slave owners went to Beast City not to suffer, but to enjoy. Chapter 3:11. Above the desert, the team of Luoye City had been walking towards the target. The team of more than 2,000 people was comparable to the previous Yanjiao tribe's entire tribe. In the middle of the team, a huge beast was walking with tortoise steps. Xian could clearly hear the friction between its huge claws and the yellow sand. There were also some beasts around that were led by the slaves. Sometimes, when they saw an active desert beast not far away, they would make a ruckus and then be violently suppressed. Even the one that Xueqi was riding needed Xueqi to suppress and appease from time to time. In contrast, among the beasts in the team, the quietest and calmest was probably the camel that Xian and the other two were riding. It was not known if they were really calm, or if their nerve reflexes were slow. The air was no longer as hot as it was at the beginning, and there was still some coolness in the afternoon. This was the 10th day since they left Luoye City. Among the slaves walking in the team, there were also some who couldn't bear it and fell down for various reasons. Basically, they couldn't get up after falling down. In the slave owners' team, there was a fixed rule. Those who fell down and could not get up in a short time would all be fed to the beasts. The tribe had never been so cruel. Even if Xian and the other two were not used to it at first, the days gradually passed and they became numb. This was the rule of the slave world. It was not known if those who died for various reasons would regret their original choice before they closed their eyes. "We're almost there," Xueqi whispered to Xian and the other two. Over a tall old sand dune, they stood on the sand ridge and looked around. Between the yellow undulating sand, there were many white places, which were snow. The wind that blew in his face was still cold and frothy. It's snowing here." Lei looked at the place in front of him in surprise. He thought that in such a place in such a season, even if the temperature was low, there would be no snow. After all, in his impression, the desert was a hot and dry place during the day. But now, his impression was overturned. "What about the city? I only see the desert." Tuo looked into the distance. Apart from the snowy desert, he saw nothing else. The beast city is still some distance from here, but it already belongs to the scope of the beast-fighting desert. Xueqi told the three of them what he knew. Although there was a lot of snow in this area, the air here was still dry. The air was too cold and dry to melt the snow on the ground, so the snow directly evaporated into water vapor. However, snow was the only source of water in this beast-fighting desert. The walking beasts bowed their heads from time to nibble on the snow to quench their thirst. They could open their stomachs to drink water, but they could not eat the snow. Nibbling too much snow at one time would make them sick or even die. Therefore, the people and beasts in the group would pick up some snow from the ground and chew on it after walking for a while. There was no shortage of water here, but it was too cold. Those with weak constitutions would not be able to withstand it. Some birds could be seen flying in the sky in the distance, but they were not wild birds. They were domesticated birds from other cities. They were probably scouting the surroundings to see which teams had arrived. Xiao Xian was listening to Su Gu talk about the desert when he heard an eagle's cry in the air. Only Cha-Cha. Someone is coming. Xiao Xian said. Su Gu believed in Cha-Cha's judgment. Saying, someone is coming here, it must be in the form of a large team. Which city? Su Gu wondered. Next to him, Wu Shi thought of something and his face changed. He walked a few steps and went around to the other side to face the team. Third young master, be careful. They may be people from Baisha City. Wu Shi said. Baisha City and Luoye City's walking routes and destinations were not the same. But if the routes of the two sides were compared, one would find that there was an intersection. At this moment, they were just at the intersection. It was really a narrow road for enemies. The team was still moving forward at the original speed. The people of Luoye City would not avoid meeting old enemies. In that case, they would be regarded as afraid. Where would the king's face go? Above the ridge in the distance, there was a team's shadow. Roar. A beastly roar that sounded like muffled thunder came from that direction. Even from such a distance, they could feel the impact of a heavy hammer. It's the Baisha King's riding beast. Su Gu said. He still had some impression of that cry. The huge figure of the Luoye City King's riding beast finally appeared in everyone's sight. Similar to the team on the Luoye City side, there were many other beasts of different sizes around the king's riding beast. Some were pulled by the slaves for the beast city, while others were the slave owners' mounts. Xian. Tua and Lei looked at Xiao Xian. Let's take a look first. Xiao Xian knew what they were going to say. Yanjiao's trader was likely to be in that team. The two teams' walking routes were almost in an X shape, and at the moment, they were at the intersection. The other side seemed to speed up a little, not wanting to miss this side. As the two sides got closer and closer, the fighting beasts on both sides seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. No matter how many slaves pulled them, they bared their teeth and roared at the other team, as if they wanted to rush up and bite. As they got closer, both teams began to be alert. Xiao Xian saw that the slaves of Luoye City had picked up wooden and stone shields, and the archers were also ready. Was this a fight before entering the city? Xiao Xian motioned for Lei and Tua to pay attention. The slaves of Luoye City would protect the slave owners, but they would not care about the three of them. Roar! Another beast roared. Because this time it was closer, it was deafening, and the impact was stronger. Roar! The Luoye City King's riding beast was not willing to fall behind and roared back. Whoosh! 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 Almost at the same time, from both teams, hundreds of arrows were shot. Among them, there were also spears with greater impact. The senior slaves guarded the slave owners' sides, and the slaves of the slave owners also seized the opportunity to show their loyalty. The more dangerous the situation, the more opportunities there were. The newly enslaved slaves around Su Gu were like this. They could not wait to squeeze in and block for Su Gu. Wherever they saw an arrow, they would gather there. They were afraid that when the chaos was over, there would be no arrow on their wooden shields. There would be no trace left, which meant that they did not do their best. Because they all went to the slave owner's side, Xiao Xian's side immediately became empty. Xiao Xian supported himself with one hand on the camel's back. His body jumped from the camel's back and flipped over. His other hand waved the stone knife in his hand, picking up the arrows that were shot over. After picking up a round, Xiao Xian did not continue to stay on the camel's back. After landing, he blocked the arrows that were shot over. He did not like to use a shield, and in such a situation with such a degree of attack, using a shield would make him feel restrained. This was a habit that the Yanjiao people had developed. Holding the knife, Xiao Xian's eyes were cold. The stone knife that he quickly waved seemed to explode into a group of gray light. In an instant, everything around him was shrouded in it. Not a single arrow was shot in, and if people were involved, they would undoubtedly suffer a bloody storm of blade killings. The camel behind Xiao Xian was still holding its neck high, calmly looking around. In its spare time, it was in the mood to lower its neck to turn over some snow on the ground. Chapter 3:12. The teams on both sides were closer. Boom, boom, boom. Xiao Xian shot another round of flying arrows, grabbed a few arrows in the air and sent them back. He did not look at the archer who was shot over there. Ayo! As the team approached, the fighting beasts on both sides could not bear it. The smell of blood in the air stimulated their madness. The slaves, who had been desperately pulling the fighting beasts before, now began to weaken the pulling force. The restrained fighting beasts felt that the pulling force was reduced. This was like a signal for them, as if they heard the horn to attack. They roared and showed their fangs and claws, rushing toward the other side. The roar of the beasts was more intense, and the sound of biting covered the screams of the slaves. The smell of blood was stronger, and they did not know whether it was the blood of their companions or the snow and sand that hit their faces. Above the white snow and yellow sand, the blood was splashed all over the ground. Looking carefully, it was the lower-level slaves who made the move. The higher-level slaves did not make a move. They either just protected the slave owners or watched from the sidelines, like watching a play. Their masters, the two big slave owners, were sitting on their respective riding beasts. They were also in a good mood, holding the thin, handicraft-like colored pottery with strange patterns, tasting the fruit wine inside. It seemed that everything that happened around them was an appetizer. The more intense it was, the more they were in the mood to taste the wine. The bloody scene was just a factor to liven things up. On the side of Baishar City, a fighting beast that had been released shook the mane on the side of its neck, raised its front paws, and attacked with a condescending oppressive momentum. In its blood-stained mouth, two sword-like fangs bit toward a slave in the team of Luoya City. The slave of Luoya City, on the other hand, held the rope of his own fighting beast with one hand and clenched his spear with the other hand. He rushed toward the other side, almost trying his best to stab, but it was picked up by the other side with a spear. Looking at the two big fangs getting closer and closer, the slave who was leading the fighting beast thought he would be bitten to death. But the next moment, he found that the Baishar side jumped up and attacked with an oppressive momentum. The shadow swept down from the air and stepped on the head of the beast's paw on the ground. Its big mouth did not bite anyone, but it shoveled a mouthful of sand and snow. The slave who was about to be bitten to death was directly knocked away. This was not the end. Without waiting for the fighting beast to have any other reaction, it was lifted up by the whole thing, along with the 5 slaves who were holding it. Cha-Cha had been observing from the sky. After observing for a while, he felt an itch in his claws. Taking advantage of the fact that the arrows and spears on both sides were almost used up, he quickly rushed over and clawed at them. The weight of the fighting beast did not exceed Cha-Cha's maximum bearing range. Although there were still 5 people, Cha-Cha did not intend to carry them all the time. After catching the beast, he threw both the people and the beast towards the Luoya City King's riding beast. He threw them towards the huge riding beast's mouth. The confrontation between the two teams did not target the kings of the two sides, and no other attackers attacked the mounts of the kings. This seemed to be a tacit understanding. The contest between the kings would be held in the Beast City, not in this desolate place where no one could witness it. At the moment, even if the huge riding beast was itching to watch the battle over there, it could only vent a few roars and could not bite the people and beasts of the other side. However, the Luoya City King's riding beast did not expect that the eagle could bring him such benefits. The king's riding beasts on both sides would not easily join the battle circle, but for the prey that was sent to their mouths, how could they not bite? A moment ago, the fighting beast wanted to bite the slaves to death, but in the next moment, it became the food of this bigger riding beast. Because of Cha-Cha's disturbance, the several fighting beasts on the Baishar side obviously had some scruples. When attacking, they were distracted and looked at the sky, but this also led to their attack not being concentrated. Several fighting beasts on the Luoya City side scratched and bitten more wounds. One of them was bitten on the neck, and a lot of blood splashed out. It seemed that they could not hold on to the Beast City. Even if they could not fight in their best state and would be disposed of. The outer battle between the two sides continued, and the teams did not stop. The kings on both sides were still in the mood to open the curtains and smile and greet each other from dozens of meters away. Xueqi once again picked up the arrows that were shot over. After a few arrows were thrown back, he looked at the other side and saw the people standing on the king's riding beast. The White Stone City's riding beast was a ferocious beast that Xueqi had never seen before. Its body was not covered with ordinary scales, but more like pieces of stone. It had a thick and short tail with a large round ball. When it swung its tail, it was like a heavy hammer hitting the ground, causing snow and sand to fly into the air. On the riding beast, in addition to the king's palanquin, there were 3 people standing. Xueqi did not think that they were slave owners, but more like slaves guarding the king. And one of them had been staring at Xueqi's side. Xueqi looked back. It was a middle-aged man who looked very friendly. Unlike the other slaves who guarded the slave owners, he looked more peaceful. Seeing Xueqi look over, the other side also smiled at him, like a kind elder. In the eyes of others, it might be a very kind and friendly smile, but Xiao Xian felt that this smile was full of killing intent. Dao Yu. Xiao Xian had never seen Dao Yu, but at this moment, he was inexplicably sure that this person was the one he was looking for. To be able to stand on a riding beast, his status was not ordinary. The other side glanced at Xiao Xian, Lei, and Tuo, and then no longer stared at them. Instead, he looked at other places, as if enjoying the scenery here. The riding beasts went in different directions, taking the team forward. The Baisha people almost rubbed the tail of the Luoye team. After the collision, the two teams gradually separated and went away. The place where they had just crossed was only left with a wreckage. Some of the bodies were left there, and some were taken away to be fed to the beasts. Arrows and broken spears were inserted in the blood-stained ground, and it did not take long for a layer of white frost to form. When the team was far away, leaving only a vague shadow, the scavengers in the desert came out from all over the place. Birds, beasts, insects and so on, all came to enjoy the meal. If another night passed, the broken limbs and wreckage here would be eaten clean. The wind covered the ground with snow, and there was no sign of a battle. Over there, Xiao Xian checked the camel to make sure that the mud was not injured before he turned over and rode on it. Lei and Tuo's situation was also good. Lei's camel was only grazed by an arrow and not shot. However, compared to Tuo and Xiao Xian, he was still a little worse. What happened? With your ability, you shouldn't have missed this arrow. Tuo asked. Lei rode on the camel and drank water from the kettle. His line of sight was taken back from the direction of the Baisha team. He said to Xiao Xian and Tuo, at that time, I felt someone staring at me and felt uncomfortable. Later, I saw him smile at me. I really wanted to break his neck. Chapter 313. When they were told by Xiao Xian that the person who had been paying attention to them during the chaos might be the traitor of the Flaming Horns tribe, Lei and Tuo both thought that if at that time they had directly rushed over and killed the traitor, that would have been good. No wonder I thought that man looked strange. Tuo said. If I knew, I would have gone over and twisted his head off. Lei felt very regretful. However, they also rationally understood that at that time, the success rate of rushing over was not high, let alone killing Dao Yu on the spot. Moreover, Xiao Xian felt that Dao Yu's strength was not necessarily weaker than theirs. It was even likely that he had the strength to match a senior totem warrior. If they really went over, even if it was a one-on-one, who would lose and who would win was not known. Not to mention that Dao Yu was surrounded by Baisha people. After careful analysis, Lei and Tuo's heart was quite complicated. A Yanjiao trader, whose strength was stronger than them, wanted to clean up the family but could not clean it up. How would they face the shaman and the leader when they went back? Xiao Xian took the time to look for Ai Shi to confirm that the man who had been standing on the Baisha City King's riding beast was Dao Yu, and then let Lei and Tuo pay more attention. Unlike the native Yanjiao people, Dao Yu, who could mix with the slave owners and reach the present level as a wanderer, was much more complicated than Lei and the others. If they were not careful, it was likely to repeat the tragedy of Yanji and the others. The more they went forward, the more places were covered with ice and snow. Xiao Xian could even feel a sense of oppression. If it was an ordinary person, they might not be able to stand in this place safely. Finally arrived. Xueqi said excitedly. In front of them was Luoye City's base in the beast-fighting desert. Nearly 10 meters high stone walls were built in a circle on the periphery. Inside, stone houses were built. There were also some small sand houses around the stone houses, as well as some simple tents. The stone houses were for the slave owners to live in, while the sand houses and simple tents were for the other slaves who guarded here. Xiao Xian and the other two followed Xueqi and lived together in a stone house. The 10 slaves that Xueqi enslaved were also brought in to serve Xueqi. Although this was not Luoye City, it was just a stronghold in the beast-fighting desert. However, in the construction of the stone house, a lot of thought was put into it. Many pieces of monolith with a length of several meters were built into a double-story stone house with a height of more than 10 meters in the center. It was a place for the king to live. Naturally, it could not be shabby. At the same time, it also represented face. If people in other cities saw that the king of Luoye City lived in an ordinary stone house with a height of 3 or 4 meters, he would be laughed at. Xueqi originally circled an open space around the stone house to let Cha-Cha rest here. Unfortunately, after entering this cold place, Cha-Cha's spirit was too high. It not only liked the weather, but also the atmosphere, tension, blood, and various beasts. Every time it disappeared and reappeared, there would always be some injuries on its body, but its spirit was very good. Seeing it play so happily, Xian also let it be. As the people of the Hui tribe said, the growth of the giant mountain eagle should be accompanied by all kinds of challenges. Xian was relieved that Cha-Cha had another reason. It had a lot of thoughts and knew how to weigh the pros and cons. If it could not win, it would run away and not die. Xian and the other two's room was not far from Su Gu's. Because of the power of slavery, Su Gu trusted Xian quite a bit. As for how much of this trust was sincere, it was not certain. But at present, the cooperation between the two sides was smooth. What do you think? Su Gu asked Xian and the other two. Not bad, Xian said. Perhaps some people were not used to such a cold, but that did not include the native Yanjiao people. Su Gu looked at Xian and the other two, and determined that the three people really did not care about such a cold. Their condition was also good, so he happily said, "That's just right. Let's go out for a walk. I haven't been here for several years. I almost forgot what the Beast City looks like. I don't know how much has changed inside." For the memory of the Beast City, Su Gu's deepest impression was that it was full of primitive, violent and bloody scenes where power determined everything. His heart was hot. When he heard that he could go to the slave owner's Beast City, Xian and the other two were also very excited. Seeing Lei and Tua looking at him expectantly, Xian nodded. "Then thank you, third young master." Xian knew that with the identity of a tribal person, he could not enter the city. He still had to borrow Su Gu's identity. The Luoya king was not strict about Su Gu's whereabouts. In other words, he was more willing to see Su Gu contact the young masters of other cities, which was also a kind of interpersonal relationship and communication. With a few slaves, as well as a few high-level slave guards sent by the Luoya king, Su Gu rode a domesticated beast and went to the Beast City. In the world of slave owners, identity was a very important symbol. If they were slaves, they would be regarded as dust. Even some of the lower-status slave owners would not necessarily get much attention. For his partners, Su Gu still took care of them. He gave Xian and the other two a riding beast to ride. Here, camels were inconvenient, so they could only use fighting beasts. In any case, this also told others that these three people were not slaves. The Beast City was not far from the stronghold of Luoya City. After their identity was verified at the city gate, the guards outside the walls of the Beast City did not pay much attention. "Who are the guards in the city?" Xian asked. "Most of them are people from the three cities of Rock Tomb, Fire Hill and Snowfield. These are the three major cities in the desert, and the Beast City was also built by them," Su Gu said. Xian had long learned about the three authoritative cities in this desert from the information provided by Su Gu. The surrounding atmosphere was already a lot more complicated. Xian did not ask more, and paid attention to the surrounding situation. In the middle of the city, there was a high field, like a giant beast entrenched there. It was also the symbol of the city, the Colosseum. However, that place would only be opened when the kings of each city were involved. The other slave owners would not open it for small fights. There was a bloody smell in the air. Some were fresh blood, while some were more old. Perhaps, this was the smell of the city. Taking a deep breath, Su Gu sighed. "It's really nostalgic." At this moment, several figures rushed past Xian's group, and the slaves on the edge were almost kicked. Xian noticed that those people were riding a kind of gerbil that was taller than a person. They moved forward quickly, but he did not know which city they were from. "Quick! The people of Rock Tomb and Fire Hill are fighting." Some of those people shouted. "Wait, I'll go too." There were people following behind. Su Gu was still angry because of the behavior of those people. When he heard this, he immediately threw away his anger. "Go, let's go and see." Su Gu looked forward to it. Chapter 3:14. They followed the people riding the big gerbils to the Colosseum pit over there. In addition to the slave owners at the City King level, the other slave owners usually played in the Beast City and were held in the Beast Pit. In the Colosseum, in addition to the huge Colosseum in the city, there were many sunken pits. Just as those people said, it was in a pit nearby. Because it was the fight between the two cities of Rock Tomb and Fire Hill, whether it was to watch the excitement or to make friends, they all gathered there. When Xian's group arrived, there were already a lot of people gathered around the huge pit with a diameter of nearly 100 meters and a depth of about 30 meters. Because many of the beasts used for riding were easily manic after being close to the pit, the slave owners would let the slaves look at them while they walked over and stood next to the pit to watch at a close distance. At this time, there was a fierce beast that was nearly 7 meters tall in the pit. Its fur was like yellow sand, and the hair all over its body was like steel needles. It looked like a gorilla, but its head was different. It was bigger and looked strange. It had 3 eyes, and the blood-red eyeballs were turning, looking at the people around the pit. At this moment, the beast had probably just been brought up. Before, it had been restrained and suppressed by the slaves. After making a ruckus, it was breathing heavily. Listening to the sound, it was like the sound of rolling boulders, which already gave people a kind of oppression. Probably the surrounding spectators made its mood more irritable. The bloodthirsty and violent color in its 3 eyes was even more intense. Roar, the ferocious beast roared. In order to show its strength, it raised its 2 thick arms and hit the ground. For a time, the originally solid ground in the pit had more than one depression. Seeing this scene, the spectators were even more expectant. Under the attack of this level of fighting beast, could the other side win? After showing off its might, the ferocious beast turned its eyes again and scanned the pit. Then, it fixed its eyes on a human figure. Xueqi, who was standing on the edge of the pit, rubbed his hands, looking like he couldn't wait to start the fight immediately. Thinking of something, Xueqi said a few words to Wu Shi next to him, pointing to a place on the edge of the pit. Wu Shi nodded and then left with a cloth bag. Xueqi had just noticed where Xueqi pointed. It was a place to bet. The spectators could also place their bets on the Battle of the Beasts. Who did you bet on? Xueqi asked. Xueqi pointed to the pit, the slave that was pressed. The person who was about to engage in a cruel slaughter with the beast in the pit was a slave sent by Rock Tomb City. At this moment, the slave stood there very calmly, without a good weapon in his hand. Once they entered the pit, there was a 50% chance that only one of them would come out alive, and the other would become the stepping stone for the winner. Of course, it was also possible that neither of them would come out alive. It's starting. Someone shouted. Xueqi looked over. The first to make a move was the ferocious beast that was already on the verge of becoming restless. The ferocious beast went straight to the only creature in the pit other than itself. Its 2 arms full of destructive power mercilessly smashed down. There was no superfluous skill. The attacks of the ferocious beasts were always more direct and fierce. Every blow was the most simple and powerful attack. There was a sudden explosion in the pit, and the splashing dust made people unable to see the situation in the pit. At this time, the people standing outside the pit could clearly feel the tremor of the ground. The slave standing on the edge of the pit to protect the slave owners saw the attack power of the beast. Their faces did not change much, but their bodies moved closer to the slave owners to protect them, so that they could better and more timely protect people and prevent accidents from happening. Some slave owners also took 2 steps back. There had been an emergency in the pit. The fighting power of the beasts was too strong, and those young slave owners who were easily hot-headed, because they were too invested, stood too close to the edge of the pit. So when the pit walls collapsed because they could not withstand the continuous attacks of the fighting beasts, they fell into it together and were trampled to death by the red-eyed fighting beasts. With the lesson of the past, although there were many crazy young slave owners approaching each time, more people still cared about their lives. The attack of the ferocious beast was very fast and destructive, but everyone knew that it was certainly not a simple character to be able to enter the pit. When in a weak position, it was necessary to rely on one's own physical strength, speed, skills, and so on to deal with the opponent and kill the opponent bit by bit. It was impossible to gain the upper hand in a hard fight. In such a place, once he failed, only death would await him. For the first blow, the slave avoided it. In the smoke that had not yet dissipated, there was a continuous roar again. It was the follow-up attack of the ferocious beast after discovering that the first blow was ineffective. The arms of the ferocious beast hit the surrounding stone walls. A piece of stone embedded in the wall was smashed, and some of the protruding corners were flattened. In the face of such a violent and continuous bombardment, the slave in the pit at this time seemed extremely delicate in comparison. After several attacks were avoided, the ferocious beast in the pit became more irritable and eager. Such a puny human had actually managed to avoid its attacks several times. If it could even touch a human, it would be impossible for it to crush a human to death. Boom! There was another explosion. This time, it hit the person, sending him flying and slamming into the wall of the pit. The people around made a hiss sound at the same time, as if the thunder had just hit them. Probably some people were still thinking about how much pain it would be to be hit like this. The slave who suffered a blow quickly entered the battle again, and was not hit again. After a while, the frequency of the ferocious beast's attack began to decline, and the spectators around had begun to become impatient. At this time, the ferocious beast in the pit suddenly made a mournful howl. This made the people who had just complained shocked. In the pit, one of the eyes of the huge ferocious beast was spurting out blood, and its two hind legs angrily stomped on the ground. However, such brute force could not be used on the opponent, because the slave's evasion was too fast. Some people who had already bet, their faces began to change. Some looked dignified, while others, such as Xueqi, were surprised and happy. "We're going to win," Xueqi said. In the pit, the ferocious beast's attack had become disorderly because of the pain and impatience. The slave also knew that his chance had come. He took a deep breath, and his momentum suddenly soared. The dragon-like meridians on his arms bulged, and some lines appeared on his body. Xueqi observed the slave-slave pattern. The slave pattern was similar to the tribe's totem pattern. In the desert cities, different cities and different factions had their own unique slave patterns, which were made by the slave owners themselves. When he saw the slave pattern, Xueqi's eyelids jumped. He had seen this slave pattern before, but it was still very early. When he first met Yan Shuo, he saw such a pattern. It turned out that those were the people of Rock Tomb City. He just didn't know what role Xueqi played in it. Looking around, Xueqi did not find the slave owner. Good. Kill it. Hey, kill. Kill. The young slave owners around were in high spirits. They liked to find fun in such a bloody situation. The bloodthirsty atmosphere and the sound of fighting made them all burst into excited shouts. Another mournful howl rang out. The ferocious beast was hit hard again. It felt a strong threat, and the remaining two big lantern-like eyeballs turned from violent to frightened. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of the bombardment burst out in the pit one after another. Countless sand and soil were shaken, and even the stones on the pit walls were knocked down. The scattered smoke and dust covered the battlefield in the pit for a while, making it difficult to see the situation inside. However, the increasingly strong smell of blood and the constant roar of the ferocious beast stimulated the young slave owners around the pit. "Boring," Lei said. Lei's voice was not loud. In the excited cheers and roars around him, it could not even lift a wave. When they hunted, it was always a quick battle. They never dragged it out like this. As a frequent hunter, Lei could naturally see that there was a deliberate delay and a performance attack. The excitement of the slave owners in the pit was not something he could adapt to. He enjoyed the fight with the ferocious beast, but not in such a form. However, this was Beast City. The breath of life in the pit was disappearing. The original strong sense of existence slowly weakened until it came to an end. Win-win. Xueqi raised his arms and shouted, his face flushed with excitement. Some of the spectators around the pit were angry, their mouths complaining that they had lost the bet. Some jumped excitedly, like Xueqi, because they had won the bet. "Let's go and take our bets. See what we can win by the way." Xueqi excitedly took people to the place where the bet was. There, many slave owners who had won the bet had gathered. Their way of betting was relatively special. Even if they won, after taking back the bet, what they won may not be a good thing. It depended on luck. Chapter 3:15. This group of young slave owners' way of betting was relatively unconventional. The loser's bet could no longer be recovered, while the winner would recover their own bet and then recover the spoils of war, which was the loser's bet. However, it was not the kind of spoils they wanted that could be obtained smoothly. When Xueqi followed Xueqi, he saw that in the place where the previous bet was placed, there were several rows of wooden boxes of the same size. These boxes contained the things that the people who lost the bet on. The people who won the bet, according to the value of the bet, would then choose from the order of the auction. As for what kind of things they could choose, it was not something they could predict. There were many young slave owners who put some alternative things in their bets. They did not seek wealth. What they pursued was just excitement and fun. "I don't know what kind of thing I can choose later. I hope it's more valuable," Xueqi said. He looked at the ranking of his bet. He was ranked 17th, not behind. After recovering his bet, Xueqi stared at the choices of the people in front of him. Although they were not so persistent in their pursuit of wealth, they could choose a more valuable item and be in the limelight, which would be cool. as Xueqi, who had been away from Beast City for so many years, had no fame in the circle of the younger generation of slave owners. He was not a person from the 3 major cities, so his sense of existence was even lower. If he could pick a good one, he might be able to brush up his sense of existence. The young slave owner of Rock Tomb City, Yan Hui, who had just won the beast battle, was sitting next to him, smiling as he looked at the people who came to pick the spoils of war. He was probably in a good mood after winning a game. If the value of the things in the box chosen by the people in front of him was not high, he would comfort them with a few words. The loser of the beast battle, the young slave owner of Fire Hill City, Di Shang, was sitting on the other side with a cold face, looking unapproachable. These boxes were personally placed by the two, and the others did not know what was in each box. Xueqi also saw a little slave owner in his early teens pick another box. When he opened it, he could see what was inside. It looked like sand, but in fact, it was the egg of a shrimp that lived in the desert around Red Star City. That kind of prawn had a very short lifespan. They would only hatch and grow when there was plenty of rain. When there was less rain and the spring dried up, they would lay eggs and die, leaving behind some prawn eggs that looked similar to sand. Those shrimp eggs were the wager of a slave owner of Red Star City. If other people had chosen such a trophy, they might not have been happy. But now, the one who picked it was a child in his early teens. He was very satisfied with this kind of food trophy. Yan Hui and the child exchanged a few words. The child, who was holding a box of shrimp eggs, was so excited that his face turned red. It was probably his first time here, and it was also his first time coming into contact with people from the 3 big cities. Xueqi did not pay much attention to that side. He was a little nervous. Xueqi, what do you think I will pick? Xueqi asked. How would I know? What do you want? Xueqi asked. Of course it's the best. Xueqi was even more excited and nervous. Xueqi looked and said, I don't know what is the best. If you were to choose, which one would you pick? Xueqi asked. The third in the first row. Xueqi answered. Xueqi looked at the boxes placed over there. The people who picked in front chose the second row more, while the first row, which was closer to them, was chosen less. Perhaps everyone subconsciously felt that it was better to have something further away. Why? Xueqi asked. Intuition. Although he said so in fact, Xueqi looked at it with a special vision. He could not see what was inside the box, but he could see that the box emitted the brightest light. Xueqi did not explain much, and Xueqi did not have time to ask again. The other side had already called his name. Luoya City's Xueqi. Hey, you're here. Xueqi walked a few steps over. For Xueqi's unfamiliar face, many of the slave owners around did not care. Moreover, Luoya City was not a powerful city in this vast desert. However, the deeds of this Luoya City king were known by many people, and it was a topic of idle chat after dinner. As for the other people in Luoya City, no one cared. Xueqi walked over in the crowd's eyes. He seemed to be nearby, pointing to the third wooden box in the first row, which was what Xueqi had just told him. Sitting on the side, Yan Hui of Rock Tomb City straightened up. Di Shang of Fire Hill City, who was originally cold, had a slightly better expression now. For him, being chosen by the people of Luoya City was better than being chosen by other people of Rock Hill City or other people who were not pleasing to the eye. Seeing Di Shang get up and personally open the box, Xueqi's heart jumped. He had a guess in his heart. Could it be? The other people around also thought of it. Their voices were a lot smaller as they stared over there. That's right. What was in that box was the bet that Di Shang put on himself. Di Shang opened the box, and the crowd only saw a red light flashing in front of their eyes. Inside the box, there was a fist-sized red translucent gem. As Di Shang picked up the gem, the red light was even brighter. Moreover, the people around also felt a wave of heat sweeping through. This is the famous Fire Hill Stone of Fire Hill City. Someone exclaimed. The Fire Hill Stone was produced in the desert around Fire Hill City. The stone was transparent and attracted a lot of people. At the same time, if you injected power into it, the stone would heat up. The more energy injected, the higher the temperature of the stone. It could even easily burn firewood. In Fire Hill City, the Fire Hill Stone was a symbol of power, beautiful and noble. People in other cities who wanted to buy the Fire Hill Stone may not be successful. Unexpectedly, a small slave owner of Luoya City could easily get such a big piece. Xueqi looked at Xueqi, who was being talked about by the crowd, and thought, that guy is probably going crazy with joy. How big was the practical value of that gem? For the Yanjiao people it was just like that. If it was bigger it could be used as a weapon, but it was only the size of a fist. It could only be used as an ornament. Perhaps it could be used to warm up in the winter and light a fire when there was no fire? However, what Xueqi valued was its symbolic meaning, as well as the influence of this stone among the slave owners. From this moment on, the name of Luoya City's Xueqi had been remembered by more people. They would definitely mention it when chatting. When Xueqi came back, he smiled particularly proudly. Some people wanted to fight with Xueqi. Unfortunately, Xueqi tightly guarded the stone, saying that even if they fought, he would not take out the gem. The other party then left. The beast's corpse in the pit had been removed, leaving only a bloody ground. Soon, the second beast fight was about to begin. This time, there were no giant beasts, but 2 slaves. For this group of slave owners, there was not much difference between slaves and beasts. Even slaves were not as good as beasts. When the giant beasts were on the stage, they were more attractive, while the slaves were inferior. The people standing around the pit dispersed a little. They planned to go to the other pit to see, but Xueqi did not leave. He intended to continue to watch the next one. In the field, the 2 slaves' seemingly irregular moves intersected with the shadows of their fists. Then, a rapid sound of fracture sounded. One of the slaves was hit and flew. His body rolled in the air and hit the stone wall in the pit. After the collision, a lot of blood spurted out from his mouth. Xueqi could see that the slave's chest had several broken bones. Moreover, these broken bones pierced his internal organs, hurting his heart and lungs. Sure enough, the slave who fell to the ground had his head askew and died directly. The reason for this beast fight was because of an ownerless female slave. The winner would own the slave. The winning slave owner was very happy and directly used the power of enslavement on the spot to enslave the person. This was the second time Xueqi encountered a slave owner enslaving a slave other than Xueqi. Moreover, this time, it was not a practice. The young slave owner who was enslaving was a little nervous. Although it was not his first time enslaving, there were always failures. Now, it was still under the watchful eyes of the public. If he failed, he would certainly be laughed at by other cities. The pressure was quite great. However, this time, his enslavement was unusually smooth. Looking at the slave who was successfully enslaved and looking at him with charming eyes, he only felt a burst of heat and quite complacent. He felt that today was really an extraordinary day. Observing the fluctuations of the flame in his mind, Xueqi moved his fingers. Because of the long and wide sleeves, no one could see that there was a little blue flame on his hand in the sleeve. Chapter 316. Even if the more sensitive people around could detect it, the flame in Xueqi's hand disappeared immediately after it appeared. They simply could not find the source of this energy fluctuation. They only thought that the other slave owners were itchy and did not care. Xueqi then followed Xueqi to other Colosseum pits to watch several Colosseum fights. There were people fighting and beasts fighting, but most of the time, it was the slaves fighting in the pit. Every year in the Colosseum, some slaves would be buried, but some would also become slaves. For the slaves, the trip to the Colosseum was a good opportunity. Just like last year's Dao Yu, his brilliant battle in the center of the Colosseum greatly improved his status among the Baisher slaves. After Xueqi made several bets, he won and lost. If he won, he would let Xueqi help him pick a box, which made him fiercely in the limelight. However, Xueqi was not too stupid. He knew that he could not go overboard. Several of them were his own choices. Although the things were a bit worse, it could reduce some people's doubts, so it was worth it. What's more, his harvest today was far beyond his expectations. Xueqi helped, so Xueqi naturally took more care of the Yanjiao trio. He also informed Xueqi of the news he had heard in the slave owner's circle. After returning to the camp, Xueqi went into the house to rest for a while. He then said to Lei and Tua, "Do me a favor and watch outside the door. I have something to do." Okay. Lei and Tua did not ask Xueqi what he wanted to do. Usually, when Xueqi was recording things, they would also guard outside the door. Some things were not good to be seen by the slave owners. Therefore, at this time when they heard Xueqi say that he had something to do, they did not think of anything else. The 2 men went out to get some fresh air and talk about what they saw today. If someone came to find Xueqi, they would report it. Anyway, they would not easily let others enter the house. After Lei and Tua went out, Xiaoxian carefully looked around to make sure that no one was staring here. Then he raised his hand. Today, he had seen several fights over slaves, and he had also seen the slave owners enslaving people on the spot. Every time those slave owners enslaved, there would be a flame in Xiaoxian's mind, similar to Su Gu's. Although there were differences between the flames, it was not as big as the totem flames between the tribes. During the enslavement, Xiaoxian clearly remembered the power fluctuations in the fireball. Every time he saw it, his impression deepened. Even when he was watching, Xiaoxian unconsciously imitated it. At that time, there were many slave owners around, so he didn't try it out. Now that he was back, there was no one else around, so it was a good opportunity. Before leaving the tribe, Xiaoxian had discussed the power of the slave owners with the shaman. For the tribesmen, it was hard to imagine how a group like the slave owners obtained their power and how they were given their power. However, Xiaoxian was now sure that the power of the slave owners was very similar to the tribe's fire seed. Xiaoxian even speculated that these two powers might be of the same origin. Taking back his thoughts, Xiaoxian mobilized the power in his body. The totem flame in his mind rolled up, and the blue flame was more active. Some slender tentacles stretched out from it, then gathered together and extended. Xiaoxian only felt a force from his head down, flowing through his neck, shoulders, and along the raised arm. It kept moving forward. The totem patterns on his face and other parts of the body were revealed. The totem patterns on the arm rushed to the elbow and stopped near the wrist. However, in Xiaoxian's body, the power did not stop. It still continued to move forward, as if to rush out of Xiaoxian's arm. Boom! There was an imperceptible soft sound. Xiaoxian's palm was surrounded by blue flames. At first, these blue flames that rushed out of the palm were somewhat diffuse, as if they would dissipate at any time. But soon, they became solid and stable, clinging to Xiaoxian's palm. Xiaoxian looked at the flames coming out of his palm. This was different from when he used the tribe's secret engraving technique to engrave Caesar. At this time, there was no totem in his hand. It was also different from the situation at that time. It was more overbearing, more powerful, and less approachable. Withdrawing his power, the blue flame in his palm disappeared. Mobilizing his power, the blue flame appeared. Back and forth several times, Xiaoxian used it more skillfully. Was this the power of the slave owners to enslave their slaves? He just didn't know if they could really enslave them. After thinking about it, Xiaoxian wondered if he should be like Su Gu, getting a small biological body to practice. His eyes swept around the room. Then, Xiaoxian found a black beetle coming out of a hole in the corner. The beetle that crawled out of the hole was originally going in another direction, but it was intercepted by Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian looked at the beetle that was not as long as his little finger. He felt that the insect was very familiar, but for a moment, he couldn't remember what kind of beetle it was. The beast city was located in a desert with a relatively low temperature all year round. He didn't expect these insects to come out in such a cold day, which was extremely rare in other places. However, there were many unusual creatures here, so Xiaoxian no longer thought about it. Instead, he turned to think about using it to try out the newly learned method of enslavement. He didn't know if it would work. Let's try it. Xiaoxian mobilized the power in his body, feeling the tentacles formed by the blue flames extend again through his arm. The solid blue flame appeared in his hand. Xiaoxian looked at the beetle on the ground, which could be crushed with a finger. He reached out and touched it. At the moment of contact with the beetle, Xiaoxian seemed to see a flaming tentacle stretching out to the beetle, like a binding. The struggling beetle, with the binding of those tentacles, became smaller until it stopped moving. When everything stopped, the blue flame in Xiaoxian's hand had disappeared. Everything around him was the same. The only difference was the small black beetle that stayed obediently at Xiaoxian's feet. Was it successful? Xiaoxian looked at the beetle at his feet and determined that it was not dead, just obediently staying in place. Insects were not like humans, let alone this kind of low-level insect. They couldn't speak, couldn't express themselves, and couldn't communicate. Therefore, Xiaoxian didn't know if this first attempt at enslavement was successful or not. If it was successful, how successful would it be? The turtle that Su Gu enslaved for the first time was already in the pot. This beetle didn't even reach the level of being in the pot. Xiaoxian didn't intend to crush it for the time being, so he just left it for observation. The beetle probably sensed that there was nothing else, so it went back to the hole. The ground was not paved with stone slabs, but sandy soil. It was very common for insects to make holes. Xueqi also didn't want to block the wormhole. Watching the beetle go to the hole, Xueqi got up and planned to go out to get some fresh air. However, after taking 2 steps, Xueqi suddenly thought of something. He jerked his head to look at the beetle that was walking toward the hole. The muscles on his face twitched twice. He wanted to laugh, but he was helpless and also a little embarrassed. He remembered why he felt that the beetle was familiar. Although the beetle in front of him looked a little different, it was still very similar to the insect in his memory. As for the beetle's name, it was a scavenger in nature, known as the dung beetle. Chapter 317. Xueqi did not tell others that he had enslaved a bug, and the wormhole in the corner of the house was not sealed. Originally, he intended to destroy it once the enslavement was successful, but Xueqi changed his mind and left the bug alone. However, the bug would appear once a day. Even one day, it pushed a dung ball to Xueqi's feet. Xueqi thought at that time, should he kill this bug, or should he kill it? Probably aware of Xueqi's mood, the bug kicked its legs again and pushed the dung ball back into the hole. Since then, it did not push the dung ball out of the hole again, saving the bug's life. Every day, looking at the guy who pushed the dung ball in front of him, Xueqi almost trampled it to death. Fortunately, the bug did not run around the house after that. Except for coming out every day, it did not appear in the house again. Several times, Xueqi saw it in the place where the camels were tied. At first, the bug was not conspicuous. In the beast city, there were many bugs that came out in the cold. These bugs were more resistant to the cold than their counterparts in other places. They were often seen in the places where the animals were kept. Xueqi could point out which one was his slave at a glance from dozens of beetles. As the days passed, Xueqi found that the bug's growth was very fast, much faster than its peers. In less than 5 days, it had grown more than twice as fast, and even showed signs of continuing to grow. This bug, in addition to its size, also began to change in appearance. Originally, it was black all over, but now it had become blue. Xueqi also wanted to try to unlock the lock on this slave, but he did not understand the process of unlocking it. He had never seen Xueqi unlock his slaves, so after some consideration, he gave up the idea. Another 5 days passed, and the blue on the beetle's body was deeper and purer. It looked like a layer of dark blue armor, reflecting the blue light under Yang Guang's eyes. As for its body size, it changed almost every day, growing even faster. From the time Xueqi succeeded in enslaving it until now, 10 days had passed. The beetle, which was not as long as a little finger, had now grown as big as Xueqi's fist. Its 6 feet were like knives with hooks. Xueqi saw it roll the dung ball in the camel shed, easily cutting off the weeds and branches around it. Originally, Xueqi was also worried that the beetle would be seen. After all, in such a place, such a big beetle was too special. Unexpectedly, this thing was quite clever. When someone passed by, it quickly hid and slipped into the haystack, leaving the dung ball, which was obviously bigger than the others, there. Fortunately, the slave who took care of the camel did not notice it. On weekdays, even if this beetle appeared in Xueqi's room, it would only be active near the corner of the hole and would not run around. This was Xueqi's request. Beyond Xueqi's expectation, this beetle was quite obedient, or it could understand some more complex instructions. In addition to Xueqi, Lei and Tuo in the same room naturally knew the existence of this beetle, but they did not know that it was Xueqi's slave. Lei and Tuo were told by Xueqi not to kill the beetle. The 2 men looked at it every time, and they naturally saw the changes of the beetle in their eyes. Although they were puzzled, since Xueqi did not want to say more, they did not ask. They wondered if the bug was domesticated by Xueqi. When it lay there motionless, the beetle looked like a piece of sapphire. "Don't say, it really looks like it," Lei said. 2 days ago, they saw a blue gem in the slave owner's bet. It was not the kind of transparent like the fire hill stone and fire crystal. Now, this beetle looked like that piece of sapphire. Therefore, when there was no one else, Lei and Tuo jokingly called the bug sapphire. Shouting, they tacitly agreed. Whether it was a dung ball or not, for Lei and Tuo, they did not mind. They just felt that this bug was very interesting. Sometimes when they were bored, they would pick up a few thin branches to play with, watching those thin branches being cut into pieces. On this day, Xueqi and a slave owner in Baisha City had a fight. Xiao Xian's group also followed to watch. In recent days, Xueqi and several slave owners in Baisha City had a fight. There were wins and losses. Yesterday, he won a desert specialty and rare healing herb. After Xueqi brought it back, he gave it to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian helped him a lot when he challenged the loot. Therefore, when Xueqi won something, he would also give a little to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian carried a little of that medicine with him, but not all of it. It was all in the room. When Xiao Xian's group set off for Beast City, in another place not far from Beast City, there was a stone house in Baisha City station. The doors and windows were closed, and only a few small stones gave off a faint light. There was a strange smell in the room, but the three people inside did not care. "How is it?" On the side, a young man wearing a lot of gem ornaments asked. Next to a piece of animal skin, another young man was sitting cross-legged. This person's neck had a string of bone ornaments carved into various skulls, and his eyebrows had a gloomy color. When he heard the question of the person next to him, his expression slightly relaxed. "Young master, rest assured." As he spoke, he raised his hand to open a jar made of animal shells and released the things inside. He saw a head of soybean-sized ants crawling out of the jar. There were a total of 9 of them, all brown and black. After a few ants came out, they entered from a cave in the house one by one, and soon disappeared. Seeing this, the young master sat down. Xueqi should have gone to Beast City to fight at this time. He is certainly not in the house. I just don't know what expression he will have when he comes back and finds that the Fire Hill Stone is missing. Ha ha ha. Because Xueqi won a piece of Fire Hill Stone from Di Shang of Fire Hill City, he was known by many people. In addition, during this time, he constantly brushed his presence. In the circle of young slave owners, the number of times Xueqi was mentioned was also more. This also made many people unhappy, including the slave owners of Baisha City who had a grudge with Xueqi. Unfortunately, Xueqi did not take out that piece of Fire Hill Stone for the gambling fight. In order to teach Xueqi a lesson, the young slave owner deliberately called 2 people to come over and find a way. At the same time, he also received news that Xueqi did not like to let slaves stay in his room, so there was today's matter. Thinking of Xueqi's loss of the stone that the Fire Mound City's young master lost, the Baisha City's young master laughed again. If such a stone was lost, Xueqi would certainly lose face among the slave owners. For this group of young slave owners, face was very important. In the room, in addition to these 2 people, there was a third person, but he did not make a sound from beginning to end, just quietly listening to the conversation of the other 2 people. Under the ground, a team of 9 ants was going from the Baisha City station to the Luoye City station. Chapter 3:18. Deep underground, there were many caves, which were dug by various insects. These 9 ants, in addition to digging by themselves, would also use these wormholes to move forward. The young master of Baisha took a sip of tea, looked at the man sitting on the animal skin with his eyes closed, and asked, "What did you see?" The man sitting on the animal skin was very impatient, complaining that the young master was really impatient. How long had it been? He asked 4 times already. The answer was also distracting, and the more distracted it was, the more energy it would consume. No matter what he thought, the man with the skeleton did not show any disgust on his face, but more respectfully said, "It's still moving forward." He could perceive some things through those ants, and then guide them to do things. In order to meet the young master's request, he did not hesitate to take out the sand ants that he had been raising for a long time. He was not a slave, but he had always maintained a slave-like status. Because of his own ability, his status among the slaves in Baisha was not bad. If Xiao Xian was here, he would be very surprised to see the totem patterns on the young man sitting on the animal skin. This was because Xiao Xian was very familiar with the totem patterns on this man's body. The totem warriors with such totem patterns were neighbors of the Yanjiao people, the Wanshi tribe. Moreover, this young man was not an ordinary warrior, but the next shaman of the Wanshi tribe. He had been in Baisha all this time, and when he returned, it was time to succeed the shaman. "Why haven't we arrived yet?" The young master of Baisha was dissatisfied. The other 2 did not make a sound. All the explanations were nonsense, and the more they said, the more the young master's temper would be. After a long time, when the young master was ready to ask for the 8th time, the man sitting on the animal skin finally said, "We're here." He had sensed through the sand ants that they had entered the Luoye City station. Around the beast city, any station had a lot of beasts. There were a lot of insects living there, especially the kind of dung beetles that Xueqi had seen before. They dug their holes very deep. Even if they were resistant to the cold, they would try to avoid the cold on the surface as much as possible when resting. Therefore, in the depths of every city, there were many wormholes. The team of sand ants from Baishur City entered Luoye City through the underground interlaced wormholes. After advancing for a while, they went out of the hole to explore, determined the direction of the smell, and continued in that direction. These sand ants were raised with herbs and were particularly sensitive to the smell of herbs. At this moment, they were looking for the herbs that Xueqi won a few days ago. On that day, Xueqi's victory, as well as the spoils he won, were all planned. The role of the herb was nothing more than a positioning tool used by the people of Baishur City. However, those people did not expect that Xueqi would give the winnings to Xueqi. Therefore, this group of sand ants finally found Xueqi's room by following the smell. They entered the room through the hole of the sapphire collector. They followed the scent and continued forward, but they did not sense the Fire Hill Stone. In Whitestone City, the person sitting cross-legged on the animal skin looked puzzled. "What's wrong?" Baishur's young lord asked. "We don't have any Fire Hill Stones," the person said. "How could there not be? Did Xueqi go out with the Fire Hill Stones?" "No, not necessarily. Your ants may have found the wrong place. Keep looking for me." The Baishur's young lord roared. No matter how angry his heart was, the person's face still maintained respect. "Yes." In the Luoye City station, inside Xueqi's house, the 9 sand ants circled around the house, intending to return to the same way. However, they found that the hole they came in from had been blocked. There was a beetle that was bigger than them. With a task on hand, the team of sand ants immediately showed their killing intent. They wanted to fight, but soon, they found that the opponent was too strong. In a face-to-face encounter, the head and torso of the sand ant in the front had been cut off and separated. In Whitestone City, the person sitting on the animal skin had an ugly expression. "What's wrong?" the Baishur's young lord asked. Seeing that the other person did not answer, he got up from the chair, stepped forward a few steps, and continued to ask, "Tell me what's wrong?" "There is." Poof. The words had not yet been spoken when the person sitting on the animal skin spurted out a mouthful of blood. This time, even the person in the house who had not made a sound could not help but frown. "Dao Yu, what do you think happened to him? What did he encounter?" The Baishur's young lord looked at the person who had not made a sound. Dao Yu's eyes flashed with sarcasm. From the wooden box next to him, he took out a medicinal herb, crushed it into mud, and fed it to the person on the animal skin. After swallowing the medicine, the person on the animal skin breathed slowly. He did not bother to say more, nor did he look at the Baishur's young lord. He closed his eyes and continued to do what he had just done. Whether he could see the Fire Hill Stones or not, his carefully fed sand ants must be withdrawn. Immediately after the first one, the second and third sand ants had been completely disconnected from his consciousness, which meant that those sand ants were all dead. He could not continue to drag it on. He must let them escape. If a team could not escape, then they would separate and escape. Every single one of them that managed to escape counted. He could not see exactly what the sand ants had encountered. He could only perceive a vague image from his consciousness. It was not a beetle, but something wrapped in flames that looked like a horn. Seeing the Baishur's young lord's angry face and intending to ask, Dao Yu hurriedly said, "Young lord, the situation is different. Do not worry. Wait a moment." "Different? What's different? Didn't you say that you can do it?" The Baishur's young lord lifted his leg and kicked the chair next to him, but now there was no other way. He could only wait. In the Luoye City station, the slaves responsible for cleaning up the animal pen and taking care of the riding beasts and fighting beasts found that today, the insects in the animal pen were particularly few. It was rare to see a shadow of a beetle. Did they encounter a natural enemy? However, the task of these slaves was only to take care of the riding beasts and fighting beasts, not pay attention to the insects. Even if they found that the insects were less today, they did not care and continued their task of cleaning up the animal pen. In a place where people did not know, there was a large-scale chase and interception. Of the 9 sand ants, 4 were left in Xueqi's house, while the other 5 fled separately. Some went into the hole from which they came, some fled from other places, and then climbed out from the window or the door. After that, they either escaped from the ground or found a hole to escape from underground. However, even if they fled separately, they could not escape the encirclement of hundreds of thousands of beetles. Especially when they drilled into the underground hole, they were directly blocked there. Poof! In the Baisher station, the man sitting on the animal skin spurted out a mouthful of blood. He looked weaker than before and his face was gray. Not only was it caused by the severing of the sand ant's consciousness, but it was mainly caused by his anger. He spent a lot of effort to cultivate the sand ants, a total of less than 20. Now, all of a sudden, there were 9 less. It was more painful than cutting his flesh. Chapter 319. When the plan failed, the Baisher young master flipped all the things in the house. The man sitting on the animal skin was kicked hard. Dao Yu was also spat and scolded twice, but compared to the former, he was not beaten. This treatment was already very good. When the young master lost his temper, the man on the animal skin and Dao Yu did not speak. One was breathing slowly, the other was meditating, not knowing what to think. When the Baisher city's young master finally calmed down, Dao Yu moved the stone stool out from the corner and placed it behind the Baisher city's young master. He advised, "Young master, this time you failed. Next time, you can come again. Why get angry and hurt yourself?" Fortunately, the young master had almost vented his anger. When he heard Dao Yu's words, he snorted and sat down with a flick of his sleeve, hatefully staring at the man on the animal skin. Dao Yu quickly exchanged a look with the man on the animal skin, signaling him to calm down. After appeasing the young master, he asked the man on the animal skin, "What the hell is going on?" "I don't know exactly what happened. I only know that the 9 sand ants all died. None of them escaped." When he thought of the feeling just now, the muscles on the man's face twitched, looking a little twisted. It was really distressing. Could it be that the news was leaked? Dao Yu whispered, as if talking to himself. The Baisher young master next to him heard this and denied. "No, this is only known to the 3 of us, and the 2 slaves arranged near Luya City. Those 2 slaves would never betray me. It's impossible for the news to leak in advance." Since it was not a slave, the 3 people in the house would not be stupid enough to disclose the news. Then, there must have been an accident. "What did you see?" Dao Yu asked the man on the animal skin. "A fire. There seems to be something in the fire, like a horn? I'm not sure. But I can be sure that those sand ants definitely did not encounter an ordinary desert beast," the man said. "Perhaps it was something enslaved by a slave owner in Luya City?" the Baisher young master asked. "No, it's not like a person from Luya City. It was not even like a slave owner." However, the man did not say the latter half of the sentence. If he said it out loud, the young master would be even angrier, and the consequence of that would be him getting beaten up alone. The young master did not have a good impression of the tribe's people. Even the people of the Wansher tribe were treated as slaves. Looking at the difference in treatment between him and Dao Yu, he knew that he was not as good as a slave. When Dao Yu heard the words fire and horn, his eyelids moved thoughtfully. On the other side, Xueqi's battle today was very smooth. Whether it was fighting slaves or fighting beasts, he won both. He won back 2 fighting beasts that had not recognized their masters and let people bring them back together. Back at the Luya City station, Xueqi first let people throw the 2 fighting beasts he won into the animal pen and take good care of them. He then went back to rest. Today, he spent a lot of energy outside and was tired. If there was anything else, he would say it tomorrow. Xueqi and the other 2 also returned to the house. As soon as he entered the house, Xueqi felt that something was wrong. He looked around the house and saw that there was nothing out of the ordinary. The tables and stools were still the same as when he left. Even the box containing the herbs had not been touched. However, when he moved his line of sight to the corner, he found that in the corner of the hole, there was a dung ball that was about the size of the hole. As the beetle grew, the hole was getting bigger and bigger, and the dung ball piled up was getting bigger and bigger. "Why did you push the dung ball out again?" Xueqi was puzzled. A few days ago, wasn't the caterpillar very obedient? Why did it push this thing into the house again today? Fortunately, it was only piled up at the hole and not pushed to other places in the house. Aware that Xueqi was back, the big beetle also quickly appeared at the hole. It then stood upside down and kicked its hind legs, pushing the big dung ball to Xueqi's feet. It was like taking credit. Xueqi was still thinking about whether to get the dung and the beetle out when he suddenly saw the strange thing wrapped in the dung ball. "Sand ants." Xiao Xian was puzzled. When did this beetle change to eating sand ants? Moreover, he had never seen sand ants that looked like this around. Where did this beetle come from? Studying the dung ball in the house was not a good experience. Xiao Xian used a branch to push the dung ball back into the hole in the corner and said to the beetle, "You can enjoy it yourself." Xiao Xian did not understand the reason for the appearance of several broken sand ant corpses, but his heart raised some vigilance. Even if he was not sure whether the appearance of the sand ants was abnormal, it was always good to be careful. If the owner of these sand ants knew that his beloved had been rolled into a dung ball, he did not know whether he would be angry and spit out blood again. But there was no other way. This beetle did not wrap the corpses. It only knew how to roll the dung ball. Unable to determine the reason for the appearance of the sand ants, and unable to get any information from the beetle, Xiao Xian did not think much about it. Instead, he thought about what he saw today. Today, in the Beast City, he saw a man from Xueqi City enslaving a fighting beast. Xiao Xian had some feelings about this. Xueqi wanted to enslave the 2 fighting beasts he won, and Xiao Xian just wanted to see it again. He found that there was a difference between the slave owners enslaving people and enslaving beasts. When enslaving beasts, the process was not so complicated. It was just like determining a master-servant relationship. The next day, Xueqi went to the animal pen to enslave the fighting beasts. The fighting beasts he used in the Beast City were brought by the team, not enslaved by himself. Now, he wanted to turn the 2 he won back into his own fighting beasts. In this way, when he went to the Beast City to fight again, he could more openly say that they were his fighting beasts. Xiao Xian also followed him to the place where the 2 fighting beasts were kept. In other people's eyes, Xueqi was doing a favor by inviting Xiao Xian to watch. In fact, Xueqi wanted to borrow Xiao Xian's ability. He knew that when Xiao Xian was there, his enslavement would be particularly smooth. The 2 beasts, one a lizard and one a scorpion, were nearly 2 meters high when they lay on the ground. Xueqi intended to enslave the first lizard beast, which was a little easier. In the animal pen, the 2 beasts that had not recognized their master saw someone approaching and showed a vigilant posture. The more aggressive scorpion raised its scorpion tail and bent it forward, facing the direction of the person who came. It seemed to be ready to sting with a poisonous sting. Its 2 big pincers were also active, demonstrating to the person who came. Xueqi entered under the escort of the slaves. There were slaves who specialized in taking care of the fighting beasts. Those who could take care of them here must have some strength. Xueqi's enslavement required the help of these slaves. He let the people control the lizard. After determining that there was no problem, Xueqi approached, then reached out and began to enslave it. Xiao Xian felt the changes in it. This was indeed much simpler than Xueqi's enslavement. Of course, it was only the process that was simple. It did not mean that it could be easily enslaved. After a while, Xueqi's enslavement was completed, and the fighting beast did not need to be controlled by the slaves for the time being. Waving his hand to let the other slaves retreat, Xueqi approached the lizard beast, intending to take a good look at it. He thought that in a few days, he would use it to fight with people. The slaves surrounded Xiao Xian. No one cared about him. The slaves only needed to ensure the safety of their slave owners. As for Xiao Xian, even if he was stung by the scorpion, they would not look at him more. Xiao Xian went to another animal pen and looked at the big scorpion inside. The scorpion was still on guard against Xiao Xian, seeming to be looking for an opportunity to attack. Xiao Xian looked at the scorpion inside, but his mind recalled the change in energy when Xueqi enslaved the lizard. While he was thinking about the simulation in his mind, Xiao Xian's hands, which were covered by his long sleeves, also appeared a little blue fire. Almost at the moment when the blue flame appeared, the scorpion, which was preparing to attack Xiao Xian, immediately retreated a few steps. Its 2 big pincers also formed a shield in front of it. Chapter 320. Was it afraid? Xiao Xian looked at the scorpion and then looked around. Within 10 steps, there was only one person, Xiao Xian. Xueqi was still more than 20 meters away from here, and the slaves were further away. Because of the distance, Xueqi did not notice the surrounding power fluctuations. The first turtle he enslaved was just an experiment. That turtle was not a fighting beast, so in Xueqi's view, it was just a wrong attempt that was better than a failed product. Now, this was a real success, so naturally, his attitude was different. Xueqi, who was immersed in the joy of enslaving his first real fighting beast, did not pay attention to Xiao Xian. Taking back the flame in his hand, Xiao Xian observed the changes in the scorpion. After a few breaths, the scorpion's two big pincers opened, and the scorpion's tail was ready to attack again. However, compared to the beginning, it was more afraid. It tightly faced Xiao Xian's direction, but did not approach him. Xiao Xian's heart moved. He did not know why, but he remembered what Lang Jie said when he was in the tribe on the other side of the river. At that time, Xiao Xian was just a poor little kid in the cave under the mountain who could not satisfy his hunger. At that time, Lang Jie and the others talked about the fire. Xiao Xian, who was called over, listened to them talk and laugh. Xiao Xian was also puzzled. Why didn't the tribe see the invasion of the fierce beasts? Because of Xiao Xian's question, Lang Jie and the others laughed. Then someone pointed to the top of the mountain and said, "Because they are afraid of fire." Xiao Xian knew that the fire Lang Jie and the others were talking about referred to the fire of the fire pit. Now, Xiao Xian inexplicably thought of the words of that year. Mobilizing the power in his body, Xiao Xian's hand once again had a flame. The vigilant scorpion once again stepped back. Just like before, the two big pincers formed a shield. Xiao Xian took a step forward. Scorpion retreated. Xiao Xian moved forward while Scorpion retreated. Putting away the flames, Xiao Xian moved forward again. Scorpion was still on guard, but he no longer retreated. Xiao Xian twisted his fingers. He was certain that the scorpion was afraid of the fire in his hand. However, when Xueqi enslaved the lizard, why didn't such a situation occur? When Xueqi was enslaved, the blue flame on his hands was also very vigorous. However, these two beasts were at best unhappy and alert, far from reaching the level of fear now. Xiao Xian wanted to try more, but Xueqi intended to leave, so he had to stop. Today, Xueqi had enslaved a fighting beast, so he did not have enough energy to enslave another one. He needed to take a good rest before continuing. On the way back to the house, Xiao Xian asked Xueqi, "Is there a difference between enslaving fighting beasts and enslaving people?" Xueqi was in a very good mood these days. For Xiao Xian's partner's question, he also readily answered. Most of the beasts that have not recognized their masters are much stronger than those low-level slaves. Therefore, when enslaving them, we do not use more complicated methods of enslavement. Instead, we use another kind. Xueqi told Xiao Xian that the main purpose of enslaving the beasts was only to fight the beasts. Therefore, when enslaving them, it would only let those beasts form a master-servant consciousness, making them more obedient. That was all. Their own abilities would not be greatly improved or weakened. For those with stronger executive abilities but weaker strength, the slave owners, while providing a source of power, also needed more constraints and management. Therefore, the process of enslavement was more complicated. When enslaving the beasts, there were no locks? Xiao Xian still remembered Xueqi telling him about the theory of enslavement and the lock. Yes, but not the kind of enslavement. Generally speaking, when enslaving people, while giving them a source of power, there will be 3 locks. These 3 chains can be seen when the slaves use their abilities. Every time one is removed, it is equivalent to removing an obstacle in their ability to improve their strength. This is the way of enslavement for us slave owners. At this point, Xueqi proudly looked at Xiao Xian. Like other slave owners, they always had a sense of superiority over the tribesmen. Can the tribesmen also enslave slaves? Xiao Xian asked. Of course not. Xueqi thought that Xiao Xian was envious after seeing him enslaving the fighting beasts. He smiled more and more proudly. You tribesmen who believe in totems can't do this. Was it really impossible to do it? Xiao Xian's fingers, which were covered by his sleeve, moved. However, he did not continue with this question, but asked, when you enslaved the turtle, did you also use the method of enslaving the fighting beasts? When he heard Xiao Xian mention the turtle, Xueqi quickly looked around. When he saw no one else, Xueqi was relieved. That was his dark history. Of course, I used the method of enslaving the fighting beasts. Otherwise, do you think I would enslave a food that has no thoughts and no execution like enslaving people? How could I do that kind of stupid thing? Xueqi was somewhat flustered. At that time, he really used the enslavement method to enslave people. Later, the more he thought about it, the more he regretted it. After that, he cooked the turtle in the pot. Anyway, no one knew how he enslaved the turtle. When it was mentioned again, he only needed to deny it. Xiao Xian glanced at Xueqi, non-committal, and no longer made a sound. He thought of the beetle again. Before, he did not have a deep understanding of the slave owner's enslavement method. He just tried it. He did not expect that they would use the method of enslaving people to enslave the beetle, not the method of enslaving the fighting beasts. Thinking of the 3 locks that Xueqi said, Xueqi returned to the rest house and carefully looked at the beetle. He found that there were not only 3 locks on the beetle, but 5. Xueqi did not know why such a situation would occur, or what the extra 2 locks were, but he guessed that it was probably related to the special power in his body. It was as if other tribes could not enslave slaves, but he could. Xueqi himself was a special case. As for the unlocking, Xueqi saw Xueqi unlocking it. During this time, after observing his more than a dozen slaves, Xueqi chose the 2 best-performing unlocks. Xueqi was next to him at that time. Xueqi quietly looked at the blue armored beetle at his feet. He would not be like Xueqi, who would destroy this slave. Recalling the changes in the beetle, Xueqi wondered if he should try to unlock the lock. However, his understanding of the slave owner's enslavement method was limited. If he rashly made a move, it would cause more uncontrollable trouble. What should he do? To be on the safe side, Xueqi still intended to wait and learn more about it before making a move. At this moment, the beetle that stayed at Xueqi's feet did not know the thoughts in its master's heart. Yesterday, it pushed the ball wrapped in the corpse of the sand ant back into the hole. Its master said to let it enjoy it, but it usually did not eat sand ants. However, its master's words were not good, so it could only eat a little every day, eating those sand ants. After eating it, it felt, hey, the taste was not bad. Chapter 321. Early the next morning, Xueqi called Xueqi, and together they went to the animal pen to enslave another fighting beast. After a night of rest, Xueqi could not wait to enslave the scorpion. After not going to the beast city for 2 days, his heart was itching. However, as long as the scorpion was successfully enslaved today, he could take them to the beast city to gamble tomorrow. The animal pen was still the same as yesterday. There was nothing unusual. Knowing that Xueqi would come today to enslave the fighting beast, the slaves who took care of the animal pen were already waiting there. Xueqi looked around. Since coming to this place, he had not seen the Luoye city king. It seemed that the whereabouts of each king was always unpredictable. After entering the beast city so many times, Xueqi had only seen the small slave owners of each city, but had never seen any king. Perhaps he would have to wait until the day when the Colosseum in the beast city was open to see the true faces of the kings. The movement of the animal pen drew Xueqi's attention back. Over there, the slaves had joined forces to restrain the scorpion. In particular, Xueqi's slaves were doing their best to show off. Although their strength was limited, their attitude was enough. They wanted to brush up on Xueqi's good impression and remove the lock on their bodies as soon as possible. When the scorpion was controlled and its tail was tied, Xueqi went up to begin the enslavement. This time, the enslavement took longer than yesterday. Even though the scorpion was already under control, Xueqi still looked exhausted after the end of the enslavement, his head full of sweat. The slaves in the back quickly took a cloth dipped in water to wipe Xueqi's sweat. The other slaves also did their duty, taking care of the young master. Seeing that there was no stool here, a slave cleverly lay directly on the ground, letting Xueqi sit on his back. After resting for a while, Xueqi's complexion was a lot better. He stood up and looked at the scorpion at close range. Unlike yesterday's lizard fighting beast, this scorpion's temper was obviously a lot worse. When Xueqi approached, the scorpion tail was erected again. It also faced Xueqi. Although it did not stab down, it still carried a threat. Xueqi found it strange and asked, "Haven't you successfully enslaved it? Why is it still so defensive against you?" Xueqi was not angry because of the scorpion's behavior. Instead, his eyes showed joy. When he heard Xueqi's question, he said, "The stronger the beast, the harder it is to tame it. It behaved like this because I used other forces when I enslaved it, and not because I subdued it with my own strength." Is there a difference? Xueqi was puzzled. Of course there is. Those who were directly defeated and willingly enslaved were definitely different from those who were forcibly enslaved with the help of slaves. My father's riding beast was enslaved after he defeated it. Therefore, even though the beast was very strong, it was very obedient to my father. Xueqi pointed to the scorpion not far in front of him and said, And like this, after the successful enslavement, there will be rebellious emotions. But it doesn't matter, as long as we can stabilize it, make it more obedient, and persevere until the beast battle. Xueqi said with confidence, in the future when I am stronger, I will also subdue one with my strength. Although the scorpion still had a little rebellious mood, it was much better than yesterday. It showed its fear of Xueqi, especially when Xueqi stretched out his blue flame hand. It was even more fearful. However, it was still not comparable to yesterday's behavior when it saw Xueqi. Xueqi walked around the scorpion to test it. He felt that if it were to fight with people, this scorpion's chance of winning was greater than yesterday's lizard beast. Since he had high hopes for this scorpion, Xueqi was naturally more attentive to its feeding. When he tested the scorpion, he also called the slaves who took care of the animal pen to inquire. Xueqi was surrounded by slaves. Some were there to protect Xueqi, to prevent the scorpion from suddenly attacking, while others were called by Xueqi to ask questions. Xueqi did not go over. He found a dung ball in the animal pen, which was much bigger than the other little beetles that rolled out. At the same time, there were some other things on the dung ball. Xueqi looked closer and found that the ball was wrapped with some insects, just like yesterday's ball wrapped with sand ants. However, the insects wrapped in this ball were not sand ants, but another kind of insect that lived underground. Looking around, Xueqi finally saw a little blue under a pile of thin branches. Yes, it knew how to hide. However, it hid itself. Leaving such a ball was too conspicuous. Fortunately, the slaves who took care of the animal pen did not pay attention to these balls. So to say, the ball wrapped in insects was really made by this beetle. However, when did this beetle change to eating insects? Probably aware of Xueqi's approach, the beetle also moved to this side. Xueqi, what are you doing over there? Xueqi asked. He did not go close to that side, as it was too dirty. Nothing. Xueqi went back. He did not want to stay near a pile of waste from the beast's metabolism. Right, 3 days later is the day when the Colosseum opens. You can follow me in then. Xueqi told Xueqi some things to pay attention to at that time. Xueqi wrote it down one by one. If he wanted to stay safely in a place full of slave owners and slaves for a while, he had to be cautious. After returning to the house, Xueqi relayed what Xueqi said to Lei and Tuo. The next day, Xueqi got up early. Today, he was going to take the lizard-fighting beast out to fight with people. He sent someone to call Xueqi and the other two to go together. However, Xueqi did not plan to go out today. He wanted to practice unlocking in the house. Although he had seen Xueqi unlocking slaves, he was still not sure about the actual implementation. He had to simulate more. If he followed Xueqi, there would be no opportunity to practice simulation. There were many slave owners in Beast City, so he would be noticed. However, Xueqi did not go out, while Lei and Tuo were very interested. They stayed in the house for 2 days and could not walk around at will. They could not go out. When they heard that Xueqi was going out, their hearts itched. Watching the fighting beast was secondary. They just wanted to go out and stroll around to get to know more beasts. In Beast City, there were many beasts that they had never seen before. Observing more could let them know more about those beasts. After waiting for the others to leave, Xueqi listened to the movements around him. After confirming that there was no one, he locked the door. He recalled the time when Xueqi unlocked the slaves, the power fluctuations and laws that were produced, and began to simulate it. However, he did not know why. Today, Xueqi's simulation did not go well. There was always a mistake in some link. After repeated failures, he was a little tired. Putting away his power, Xueqi sat on the stool, always feeling restless. It was because he could not calm down that he repeatedly made mistakes. In the afternoon, a slave who followed Xueqi came to Xueqi and asked Xueqi if Lei and Tuo had returned. I didn't see their people. What happened in the end? Xueqi hurriedly asked. There was a dispute not long ago. When it calmed down, the young master could not find their people. For this reason, the young master also lost his temper. The slave said with dissatisfaction. Hearing this, Xueqi did not care about anything else. He took his knife and went with the slave to Beast City. Chapter 322. On the way to the Beast City, Xueqi listened to the slave talk about the matter. The slave could not explain it clearly. After all, in the chaos, The slaves naturally protected the slave owners and did not care about others. They would not spare extra attention to pay attention to Lei and Tuo's movements. When Xiaoxian arrived at the beast city, Sugu's face was taut and angry. Obviously, he was in a very bad mood. Looking around, Xiaoxian did not see the lizard beast that was brought out this morning. Then, he connected it to what the slave just said. Sugu lost the beast fight. When he saw Xiaoxian, Sugu's face relaxed a little. For his partner, Xiaoxian, Sugu's attitude was still good. I don't know where they went. I sent people to look for them, but I couldn't find them, Xueqi said. He did not want to mention the previous loss of the beast fight. After the end of the beast fight, there was chaos because of the dispute between several bystanders. When the chaos was over, the slave owners left with their slaves, and Xueqi did not find Lei and Tuo. In this territory dominated by the slave owners, if the people of the tribe walked around at will, they would certainly suffer losses. Even being quietly solved was very likely. Therefore, on the first day of coming to the beast city, Xueqi told Xiaoxian and the other two. Before that, the three people were very cautious, but they did not expect such a thing to happen today. Xueqi thought that Lei and Tuo went out of the city to return to the station, or went to other places in the city to do things. In Xueqi's impression, the tribal people's style of doing things was always mysterious. However, seeing Xiaoxian's reaction, Xueqi knew that these two situations were not necessarily the case. After listening to Xueqi's account, Xiaoxian said, I didn't let them do things. I also believe that they would not run around at will. Something must have happened, or seen something. Where did they disappear just now? Xiaoxian asked. Around here, there were only traces of the chaos on the ground. The footprints were messy, with many people and beasts' footprints. They were not far from me, but during the chaos, they were pushed away by the crowd. Carefully recalling the chaos just now, Xueqi's face changed. Just now, she was so angry that she didn't think much about it. Now that she had calmed down, the more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. She looked at Xiaoxian and asked, What do you think? Xiaoxian shook his head. Everything is just a suspicion. Losing the person and not paying attention to the situation during the chaos, Xueqi felt that his face was not bright. He also felt some guilt towards his partner, Xiaoxian. I'll send someone to look for him. If you have tamed beasts with a keen sense of smell, bring a few of them here. It'll be easier to find people that way, Xiaoxian said. Listening to Xiaoxian's words, Xueqi also understood what he wanted to do. He told Wu Shi to go back and bring the beasts that met the conditions. Wu Shi did not say much and rushed back to bring two beasts that looked like wolves and dogs. This kind of beast's individual fighting power was not comparable to others, and it was basically not in the pit of fighting beasts. They were usually used to find runaway slaves and beasts to fight, or to find prey. When Xiaoxian rushed over, he deliberately brought two pieces of clothing used by Lei and Tuo, letting them smell it. After the two beasts smelled the clothes, they sniffed the ground around them and then went straight in one direction. Over there. Xueqi's spirit was shocked. Hurry up and keep up. At the same time, Xueqi also thought. It was just that Lei and Tuo left without permission. If he found other people setting up a trap, he would never spare them. To Xueqi and Xiaoxian's disappointment, the two beasts only chased for a while and then stopped. No more? Just here, I can't find them anymore? Xueqi looked around. The slave owners were riding a variety of beasts, walking back and forth with the slaves. No one stayed in the same place all the time, and he couldn't get any useful information by asking. The useful footprints on the ground had long been stepped on by other passers-by, and there were no clues. Xiaoxian blew the whistle for contact, but no one responded. Until dusk, they still couldn't find anyone. After leaving the city, Xiaoxian also called Cha-Cha, who had been entertaining himself near the desert, to look for them. Back at the Luoya city station, Xiaoxian entered the house and saw the withered grass in the corner that had not been used. He took one out and tested it. The softness was still there. Taking a deep breath, he calmed his emotions and calmed down. Xiaoxian took the withered grass and mobilized the power in his body. He looked at the hands and rope that appeared in his mind, immersing himself in it. He wanted to use this way to predict the position of Lei and Tuo. When he got out of that state, Xiaoxian had a moment of dizziness. The number of times he tried to unlock the knot today was too many and consumed a lot of energy. Now, after the knot divination, he was unusually tired. Shaking his head to clear his mind, Xian looked at the knot in his hand and carefully identified the conclusion on the knot. The more he looked, the tighter his brows wrinkled, and the deeper the hostility in his eyes. At this time, Xueqi came to knock on the door. Xian moved the door panel and saw Xueqi standing at the door with a very bad expression. Xueqi walked into the house, not letting the slaves follow. He looked at Xian and asked, "Do you have any guesses about Lei and the others?" "Baisher City," Xian said briefly. Xueqi was surprised. He didn't expect Xian to be able to guess. However, thinking of Xian's strange prediction ability, he was relieved. Handing a piece of cloth to Xian, Xueqi said, "Look at this. Someone just sent it over." The cloth was similar to the one worn by Xian. It was cut from Lei and Tuo's clothes. There were only 4 words written on it. "See you at the Colosseum." Scratching his head, Xueqi didn't know what to say. He thought about it and was afraid that Xian would be impulsive and go directly to the Baisher City Station. He advised, "Don't go to the Baisher City Station. If you go, you won't be able to come back." "You can rest assured that I know," Xian said. He rolled the cloth and put it aside. "This cloth is here with me." "Okay." Xueqi had no opinion. After a few more words, Xueqi left. Xian thought about it all night in the room. He was not sleepy, thinking about the real intention of the other party to capture Lei and Tuo. The next day, Xueqi did not enter the Colosseum city. He was not in the mood. Knowing that it was the Baisher City people who made things difficult for him, he also held back his anger. Of the 2 enslaved fighting beasts, one was already gone, leaving only the scorpion beast. He stayed in the animal pen all day, personally watching the slaves feed the scorpion beast. He also inquired about some herbs that were said to strengthen the fighting power of the fighting beasts. Although he didn't know whether it was true or false, he still got some and found people to catch a few small desert beasts to do experiments. Xian did not go over. He called back Cha, telling it not to run around and not to go to the Baisher City station site. Xueqi thought that the Baisher City people, because of the grievances between the slave owners, started with the tribesmen around him. His heart was also glad that Xian did not go out that day. Xian thought more about this matter. There were elements of the grievances between the 2 cities, and perhaps Dao Yu. He just didn't know what role Dao Yu played in it. "Dao Yu." Xian touched the hilt of the knife on his waist. Xueqi said that if Xian went to the Baisher City station, he would certainly not return. Xian also knew that his own strength could not support everyone in Baisher City. Moreover, since the other party sent someone to deliver the cloth, they must have taken precautions. After thinking about it all night, he did not think of a way to deal with it. Xian sat in the house and continued to think. Since the other party said, "See you in the Colosseum," was it to let Lei fight the beasts? If so, before that, the 2 people were not in danger for the time being. But the Colosseum in the center of the beast city, how could they come out? Just as he was thinking, Xian heard a little movement. He looked over and saw a blue beetle lying at his feet. Xian stared at the beetle at his feet, thoughtful. Just as the beetle did not wait for Xian's response for a long time and was about to leave, Xian spoke. "Come back." The beetle took a few steps toward the hole and immediately turned and crawled back. Xian leaned over and reached out to the beetle. Before, he thought about unlocking the beetle later, but now that Lei and Tuo's matter happened, Xian changed his mind. He intended to unlock the first lock for the beetle. Seeing the blue flame coming out of Xian's hand, the beetle seemed to know Xian's intention and stayed in place. He didn't know if it was too excited, but its 2 hind legs gently kicked on the ground. It was a habit of pushing the ball for a long time, and when it was excited, it would be like this. Chapter 323. Recently, in Luoye City, the slaves responsible for taking care of the fighting beasts found that the insects in the animal pen were somewhat wrong. The so-called soil and water raised the insects. The slaves who specialized in taking care of the animal pen thought that they were still very experienced. They also knew very well about the beetles that often appeared in the animal pen to clean up the waste. But this time, the movements of the insects made them puzzled. A few days ago, they suddenly disappeared en masse, and they did not care. Then, the waste in the animal pen began to decrease, and the insects were more. They could often see the small beetles active in the animal pen. In this regard, the slaves were quite happy. There was less waste to deal with, and they were much more relaxed. Sometimes they could find a few large dung balls. However, this situation did not last long before it changed again. The waste in the animal pen increased again, and the beetles that were originally active in the animal pen were less. Moreover, this change was still continuing. Where did the beetles go? The slaves who cleaned up the animal pen were puzzled. In a certain animal pen, 2 slaves had just cleaned up the waste in the animal pen and sat next to the animal pen to rest. How do I feel that there are more and more of these wastes? A slave complained. I think so too. It may be because the Colosseum is about to open. These days, there are more things to feed, and the fighting beasts are more. Another slave sighed. They could only complain in private when the slave owners were not paying attention. You say these 2 days, how come these insects have become less? One asked. Not far from his feet, there was a beetle crawling by, and it stretched its legs and kicked with its feet. I don't know, it went underground for the winter. Who cares? We just have to take care of the fighting beasts. That's also. Ow! A slave who was playing with the beetle with his feet screamed. What's wrong? He was startled by the cry of his companion. The slave who had just screamed bent his leg and turned his foot over to look. His simple shoes made of coarse cloth and grass had a big hole in the front, and his toes were exposed. Originally, he didn't care. It was nothing to wear like this, but when he kicked the beetle with his feet, he felt a little itchy. I don't know if it was bitten or scratched. The slave said. He must have been scratched. These insects eat trash. How can they bite people? The other said indifferently. They had been working in the animal pen for so many years and had lived with these insects for so many years, but they had never been bitten. Hiss, it's actually bleeding. It's okay. The bug only scratched me a little. The 2 slaves did not care. The other slaves who were busy working in the animal pens did not carefully observe the changes of the beetles in the animal pens. Therefore, they did not know that the beetles, who were acting more and more strangely, were gradually abandoning the excreted waste and turning to other food. On Xiao Xian's side, after sending a message to Xueqi, he left the Luoye city station. Xiao Xian had a pass here and could freely enter and exit the Luoye city station. Although he could not enter the beast city, he could still go to other places. He planned to go out. Although he might encounter people from Baishur city, he still decided to take a risk. The other party was very calm. Perhaps they had also investigated Xiao Xian's group, but Xiao Xian knew very little about them. Since the other party did not take the initiative to make a move, Xiao Xian decided to take a step first and try the other party's reaction, which would help to speculate the other party's intentions. Xueqi, who was staying in the animal pen, heard the slave's report and did not continue to stare at the scorpion beast. He didn't say where he was going? Xueqi asked the slave who came to report. No. He didn't say. He just said that he was going out for a walk. The slave trembled. He must have gone to Baishur city. Xueqi said. He did not expect that Xiao Xian would let him rest assured yesterday, but today he ran away so quickly. He also counted on Xiao Xian to help him a few more times. He could not be slaughtered by the Baishur city people so early. After Xiao Xian left, he sat on Cha-Cha's back. He first flew a few laps around the Luoye city station to familiarize himself with the terrain. Cha-Cha was already very familiar with this place, but Xiao Xian also wanted to see it himself. After looking around, Xiao Xian let Cha-Cha fly in the direction of Baishur city for a while. The closer they were, the more cautious they were. After seeing the Baishur city station, Xiao Xian let Cha-Cha temporarily stop and hover in place. A shadow flew from the Baishur city station. It was a bird, slightly smaller than Cha-Cha. It did not look as strong as Cha-Cha, but its speed was very fast. From the beginning of the takeoff, it had been moving at a very fast speed towards Xiao Xian. There were also people on the bird's back. A chill suddenly rose, and Xiao Xian's heart was alerted. Go! Xiao Xian patted Cha-Cha, signaling it to withdraw. A few more shadows appeared around them. They suddenly appeared from the ground below. There were some undulating small sand dunes around them. They should have dug a hiding place in the sand dunes. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. A total of 10 birds took off from the ground, forming an encirclement. Fortunately, Xiao Xian did not let Cha-Cha get closer to Baishur city. He withdrew quickly and was not surrounded. Xiao Xian's body was low, paying attention to the surrounding pursuers. These people seemed to be deliberately waiting for him. Probably last time they only caught Lei and Tua, and he was the only one left, so they waited for him to come to their door. The warning in his heart rose again, stronger than before. Xian had a feeling of being locked on. Whoosh! An arrow came through the wind. It was shot by the person on the back of the bird that rose from Baishur City. If it was an average person, the main target would be Cha, but the other party was not. The target was Xian. After perceiving the threat, Xian signaled Cha to dodge. He himself also pulled out his knife, guarding against it. The arrow almost brushed past his arm, passing through his body with a cold wind. It was like a stirred-up storm, blowing painfully. The sleeve that swayed with the wind was also pierced with a hole. Although it just passed through the sleeve and did not directly touch the skin of the arm, if Xian lifted up the sleeve at this moment, he would certainly find that there was already a mark there. If it was slightly broken, it would bleed. While dodging, Xian quickly looked at the pursuers behind him. Although it flashed past, Xian felt that the pursuer behind him, the one who shot the arrow with absolute killing intent, was Dao Yu. The prediction of the target's behavior, as well as the decisiveness of the shot, proved that this was a shrewd hunter, a killer who had hunted countless prey. The strength of the arrow shot was even more powerful. It was definitely not under the Tianshan tribe, who were good at using bows and arrows. It was even a notch higher. In addition to Dao Yu, the other pursuers also carried a bow, aiming at Cha. Cha needed to constantly avoid the arrows that were shot. Fortunately, the arrows shot by those people were not as good as Dao Yu in terms of strength, speed, and accuracy. Otherwise, Cha may not be able to successfully avoid them. Even if he was facing Dao Yu alone, Xian felt quite a bit of pressure. Not to mention that there were more than 10 people chasing this side. The second arrow flew straight to the back of Xian's head. Xian's wrist moved, and the blade was slightly slanted. Clang! After the arrow touched the blade, because of the angle of the blade, it was bounced in the other direction. Xian could clearly feel the moment the tip of the arrow touched the stone knife. The stone chip splashed on the knife. The wrist holding the handle of the knife was hurt, and the knife almost fell out of his hand. His arm was still tingling. Not to mention the strong bow, Dao Yu himself should have reached the level of a senior totem warrior. How long had it been? From the time he betrayed Yanji until now, it had only been more than 10 years. At that time, Dao Yu was just a wanderer, but now he could improve so quickly. Even if it was a totem warrior in the tribe, without the help of the fire crystal, before the fire seed was reignited in the old land, very few people could reach his speed of improvement. Dao Yu was still waiting to shoot the third arrow, but looking at the figure in front of him that was getting farther and farther away, he had already put the bow on the string and stopped. Shooting again would be a waste of arrows. These arrows, each of them were made with precious consumables, and he did not want to waste them at this time. When he removed the arrow, Dao Yu raised his hand, and the several eagles behind him also stopped, no longer continuing to chase. "Don't chase," someone asked. "He's just a coward." "There's no need to waste any more effort," another person said. "It's a pity that we couldn't catch them. When the time comes, let the 3 Yanjiao people play together, that would be better. It must be very interesting." The people who came over laughed and glanced at Dao Yu's face. Seeing that Dao Yu seemed to be in a good mood, they asked, "What do you think?" As slaves, their level was not as good as Dao Yu's. They really had to be under Dao Yu's control. Therefore, when Dao Yu let them ambush here, even if it was freezing outside for a day, they did not dare to complain. They could only say it in their hearts. They knew that this person's means were good. If they offended him, they would not see tomorrow's sun. For Xian, who had escaped from their hunting range, Dao Yu's evaluation was an understatement of nothing more than this. His tone was filled with pride and complacency that he usually would not reveal. So what if he was a totem warrior? Wasn't he still suppressed by him, a wanderer? For Xian, in fact, Dao Yu did not know much about him. He only knew that the 2 people he caught seemed to listen to Xian's orders. Looking at Xian's age, he believed that Xian was a descendant of a tribe leader, just like several other tribes. "Find someone to keep an eye on Luoya City and see that kid's movements," Dao Yu said. "Yes." The people next to him quickly responded. "Are you worried that he will go to other tribes for help?" someone asked. Dao Yu smiled contemptuously. "Other tribes? Except for the few who were caught, the others are very busy. How can they manage the Yanjiao people? As for the Yanjiao tribe, it's too far away. The few people who were caught, they can only wait for death. What if the kid who escaped rushed into the Colosseum? One person asked. That's even better. Dao Yu's smile deepened. In the Colosseum, it was a battle of life and death. The fighting beasts that could be put into the Colosseum, which one was easy to deal with? Even last year, when he entered the Colosseum, he made all kinds of preparations in advance. His strength was comparable to the general tribe's senior totem warriors, but he still paid a big price. How could those totem warriors, who were only at the intermediate level, escape? Chapter 324. After Xiao Xian broke away from the chase, he found a place to check Cha-Cha's injuries. He determined that it was not a big problem, just missing a few feathers, and took off again. He did not immediately return to the Luoye city station, but instead looked around the beast-fighting desert, looking for a place with little human and beast activity. Other than the liveliness when the various cities came over, there were many places in this snowy desert where there were very few human and beast activities. Moreover, with the imminent opening of the Animal Fighting Colosseum, there were fewer and fewer people going out for activities. For Xiao Xian, this was a good thing. He needed a quiet place where no one would disturb and no one would pay attention to him to break through. Yes, Xiao Xian felt the barrier. When he practiced the enslavement method, he felt it. Yesterday, when he unlocked the first lock on the beetle, that feeling was even more obvious. The totem pattern on his arm was already very close to his wrist. It seemed that as long as he waited for a while, he could rush over. If it was a normal time, Xiao Xian would take a well-prepared attitude, but now the situation was different. Especially after a brief meeting with Dao Yu, the decision in his heart became more and more firm. He must break through this barrier as soon as possible. Dao Yu had the intention to kill them. After the incident just now, Xiao Xian had already determined that. He just did not know how Lei and Tuo were now. Were they still safe? If Dao Yu just wanted them to enter the Colosseum, their lives would not be in danger for the time being. Shaking his head, Xiao Xian knew that the most important thing for him now was to break through first. Even if he was special compared to others, he had killed more than one senior totem warrior. But after all, there were some skills and coincidences, and there was no absolute suppression. Especially in this place, an intermediate totem warrior was really not enough to look at. Only by breaking through, there would be more opportunities to save Lei and Tuo. Back at the Luoye city station, Xueqi saw that Xiao Xian was safe and sound, so he was relieved. Are we going to the beast-fighting city? Xiao Xian asked. Yes. I heard that someone in Baisha City just took a fighting beast to the city. Just in time, I'll clean them up. Xueqi ordered the slaves to take the scorpion beast and prepare to enter the city to fight. Xiao Xian packed up and followed Xueqi into the beast city again. When Dao Yu received the report from his men, he still felt that it was inconceivable. That kid had eaten a loss in the morning, but in the afternoon, he dared to run to the beast city again? Wasn't he afraid of ending up like his two companions? Otherwise, I'll find someone to teach him a lesson? A person beside Dao Yu said. Although he said that he was going to teach him a lesson, the posture of his hands was like he was going to kill him. Dao Yu straightened his new flowery clothes and didn't care. Up to you. He was now mainly thinking about how to please the White Stone King, rather than spending more energy to pay attention to other people. At this time, in the Beast City, Xueqi was fighting with a young master of Baisha City. Xueqi's fighting spirit was high. He looked at the Baisha people's eyes that were spitting fire. I, your father, don't care about others. I'm going to fight with you guys from White Stone City. It seemed to feel Xueqi's anger. Although the scorpion beast usually did not give Xueqi much face in the animal pen, in the beast fighting pit, its state made Xueqi very satisfied. The other side's fighting beast had been guarding against the scorpion's tail. Who knew that this scorpion's fighting style was completely different from the scorpion beasts it had won before? It came up with a few fierce pincers. He didn't know if it was because when it was locked in the beast fighting ring, it was stimulated by Xiao Xian and enslaved by Xueqi. This scorpion beast had a belly full of anger. Finally, it waited for a place where it could freely vent, and directly exploded. That fierce strength, that big pincer waving, it did not use the stinger on its tail. Xiao Xian did not always stay next to the beast fighting pit. He walked around nearby, especially in the place where someone was enslaved on the spot. He felt the enslavement of the slave owners in each city at a close distance. At this time, the blue flame in Xiao Xian's mind was very active. Most of the enslavement methods used by the slave owners in different places were actually the same, with only a few differences. When Xiao Xian felt these small differences, he also followed the simulation, keeping the blue flame in his mind active, or even more active. This was good for his breakthrough, which was why he chose to enter the city. While observing the slave owners' enslavement, Xiao Xian also noticed that someone was following him. Several sneak attacks were avoided by him. Here he would not easily reveal his totem patterns, nor would he unscrupulously fight here. In the territory of the slave owners, it was better for the tribesmen to be low-key. Just as Xiao Xian approached the beast fighting pit where Xueqi was at this time, the fight in the pit had just ended. Seeing Xueqi laugh and let the slaves hurry down to check the scorpion beast's injuries, Xiao Xian knew that he had won. Just as the people around the beast fighting pit were discussing the fight just now, there was a sudden disturbance. Not far away, a tall fighting beast like a giant bear suddenly went crazy. The slaves who originally controlled it somehow made a mistake, letting the fighting beast break away from its shackles and rush into the crowd, just in the direction of Xueqi's beast fighting pit. The giant bear rushed very fast, and every foot was like a meteor falling to the ground. The ground shook with the roar, hitting the people's nerves. The slaves only cared about protecting their slave owners and did not care about other things. The surrounding small riding beasts screamed and ran around. When their will was different from the people riding on their backs, it became even more chaotic. A man riding a big gerbil pulled the rope, indicating the gerbil to run to the left. However, the gerbil's reaction was to run to the right in a hurry. Under this divergence of left and right there was a moment of pause. The man and the beast continued to compete. When the result of the competition came out, they turned around and collided with the people and the riding beasts behind them. The crowd that had gathered around the beast fighting pit ran and roared. Among them, two people quickly approached the place where Xiao Xian was located, one on the left and one on the right. Almost at the moment when the other party stared at Xiao Xian, it triggered Xiao Xian's sensitive nerves that had been stretched. With the example of Lei and Tua, Xiao Xian naturally could not repeat the same mistakes. He decided to enter the city and also made preparations. At this time, he skillfully moved in the chaotic crowd. The man on the left of Xiao Xian pulled out a small sharp knife and hid it behind his wrist. When he was ready to move closer, several big gerbils rushed in front of him. He could only stop and wait. When the gerbils passed, he looked again but could not find Xiao Xian's figure. He was planning to look around again when a black cold light flashed in front of his eyes. He couldn't see what it was, but at that moment, there was an unspeakable sense of despair. Puff, a soft sound, in such a noisy environment, was difficult to detect. That person wanted to raise his hand to touch his neck, which was a little strange, but he found that every movement he made was as if he was stuck, halting and halting. The blood was like an open reservoir, pouring down from the throat. The bull-riding beast, which had been running, directly picked up the people in front of it with its horns. A Red Star City slave owner riding on the back of the bull did not care about the blood splashing, nor did he look at the people who were picked up. He controlled the bull under him to leave the chaotic place. Another person who was close to Xiao Xian temporarily avoided the gerbils when they came over. When he looked again, he could not find Xiao Xian's people. He only saw his own people being picked up by the bull. Seeing the other party fail, he did not look at it much. He felt that the other party was really stupid. The target was not killed, but he was picked up by the bull. Looking around for Xiao Xian's figure, he felt a pain in his wrist, and then a sudden pull pulled him in one direction. Looking forward, the manic giant bear was coming this way. Seeing the giant bear running over, he was anxious, but the silk trapped on his wrist was very tough. He cut it with a stone knife and did not cut it. The pulling force from his wrist was still increasing, pulling him closer to the giant bear. He couldn't even find where the other end of the pulling force was. Panic, fear, horror. The struggle was futile, and the binding force on his wrist was getting tighter. Just when he was determined to cut off his wrist, it was too late. The giant bear's paw had already come. Bang! Blood splashed, and the man was sent flying. For others, it was just an insignificant person who died under the bear's paw. When everything calmed down, the chaos dispersed, leaving only a mess. After another day, probably no one would talk about it. Chapter 325. Xueqi was also worried that Xiao Xian, like Lei and Tua, would disappear in the chaos. When he saw that Xiao Xian was safe and sound, Sugu's heart was relieved. Are you okay? Xueqi asked, pointing to Xiao Xian's shoulder. What's that? Xiao Xian looked sideways and saw a steel needle-like white line piercing his clothes. This was not the wire he had just used. He pulled it out and looked at it, suddenly saying, "Oh, it should be a gerbil's beard. How did the gerbil's beard get on your body?" Xueqi was puzzled. During the chaos, those gerbils did not run slowly, so how did their beards get cut off? He did not know which gerbil was so unlucky. Seeing that Xiao Xian was okay, Xueqi focused his attention on the victorious scorpion beast brought out by the slaves. Because of the sudden chaos, he could not get his spoils. He could only wait for the next time he saw the people of Baishur city. The time was not early, so Xueqi did not stay in the beast city for a long time. He took the people and beasts back. After returning to the Luoye city station, Xiao Xian ate something, took a little rest, and then rode the eagle away. He needed to find a place to try to break through. Xiao Xian let Cha-Cha fly out of the beast-fighting desert. At the edge of the desert, he looked down and saw the high sand dunes undulating like waves in a sea of sand. There was no human activity at the border, and even the desert beasts that came out were very few. It's here. Xiao Xian let Cha-Cha go down. Xiao Xian finally chose a place in the middle of two sand dunes. As long as it was not in the air, people in the distance could not see this side. Cha-Cha rested on the top of the sand dune, responsible for guarding. Night fell. Above the vast desert, two moons that were close to round hung high in the sky. As the full moon night approached, the two moons were closer. Above the beast-fighting desert, the white snow reflected the moonlight, making the desert look like a real ice field, making people forget that this was actually just a desert. Everything in the surroundings could be seen clearly under the moonlight. If one stood on the sand ridge, they could even see many small animals that came out at night. Xiao Xian sat on the sand and closed his eyes to feel the totemic flame in his mind. The totem power in his body began to move, seeping into every meridian and blood vessel, flowing along with his blood. Compared to intermediate totem warriors, senior totem warriors were much stronger. Therefore, whether it was their bones, muscles, meridians, or blood vessels, they would all change under the influence of totem power in order to bear more power. Under normal circumstances, such a change would happen after a few days of accumulation. Even with the help of the fire crystal, the change would not be too drastic. As for the fire crystal, it was a gentle change for the totem warriors, and the backlash was not strong. This was why the tribesmen valued the fire crystal so much. Unfortunately, Xiao Xian could not break through with the help of the fire crystal. When the tribesman used the fire crystal to upgrade, he could only use the fire crystal to relieve fatigue, and could not go further. But now there was also an opportunity. In his mind, the totem flame rolled up, and the flame body was getting higher and higher. Among them, the red and blue flames were very obvious, surrounding the two-horned totem and expanding outwards. With the change of the totem flame, every trace of totem power in his body was like a surging river, suddenly erupting, scouring and flowing. Impact, impact, impact again. His meridians were widened and strengthened, and every muscle was also changing. The pain caused by the forceful impact was obvious. It was as if there was a fierce battle going on inside his body. Xiao Xian's body felt like it was pierced by thousands of needles. His muscles twitched and large drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. Even breathing became difficult. His arms, which were covered by his sleeves, had already swelled up. If he rolled up his sleeves, he could see the dragon-like meridians on his arms. The totem tattoos on his body, including the ones on his face and other parts of his body, had all changed from the original dark color to the color of flames. Just like when Xiao Xian awakened his totem power by the fire pit, at first glance, it looked like it was drawn by hot magma. The fiery totem tattoos extended along his arms, rushing past his elbows, passing through his forearms, and all the way to his wrists, where there seemed to be a solid wall blocking the lava flow from rushing over. The totem tattoos on Xiao Xian's body became brighter and brighter, as if they were accumulating power, ready to go. On the high sand dune, Cha-Cha was vigilantly watching the surroundings. At this time, if someone came to sneak attack, Xiao Xian would be in danger. Not only would his breakthrough fail, but he would also be seriously injured. Suddenly, Cha-Cha heard some movement. Its sharp gaze swept towards a place, not far from where Xiao Xian was sitting. Cha-Cha silently spread its wings and approached that place. If there was anything that was disadvantageous to Xiao Xian, it would rush over with all its might. But if it was just some unimportant small beast, it could not act recklessly, as it would disturb Xiao Xian's breakthrough. On the sandy ground, the sand on the surface was lifted, and a few thin claws stretched out from the ground, followed by a small head, and then a worm the size of a small watermelon. Cha-Cha had seen this worm before, the one that often rolled balls. Xiao Xian had told Cha-Cha not to worry about the worm, so after seeing it, Cha-Cha retracted its wings. The beetle circled around Xiao Xian's body, but did not approach, as if it was afraid of the airflow and power around Xiao Xian's body. Perhaps it also knew that it was not the time to say hello, so after circling once, it found a place to stay. Today, it did not find any trace of Xiao Xian in the Luoye city station. After leaving the station, it sensed Xiao Xian's position and directly came to find him. Xiao Xian's breakthrough was not short, starting from the fall of the night until dawn. Cha-Cha stretched its neck, stretched its stiff body, took off, and checked at a low altitude. After confirming that there were no other people or dangerous beasts, it landed and continued to wait. Looking around, Cha-Cha found that the worm had run to the other side of the sand dune. Because this was the border area, one side of the sand dune was only yellow sand, and the other side was sand covered with snow. At this time, the beetle was rolling a snowball, walking upside down, kicking the snowball with its two legs. When the sun shone on the sand dune, Xiao Xian opened his eyes and breathed a long sigh of relief. He was sweating, and when the wind blew, it seemed cold. Looking up at the sand ridge, Cha-Cha was standing there, and in addition to it, there was also the beetle. This worm had found him. Looking around the totem flame in his mind, Xiao Xian found that where the blue flame was active, a line extended, and one end of the line was connected to a small spark. This spark was probably the worm. This was the first time Xiao Xian clearly felt the connection between master and slave. Before the breakthrough, he was aware of it, but it was not as clear as now. He didn't know what the big slave owners were like. After enslaving so many slaves, would they be able to separate thousands of threads from the flame? If it was cut, what would happen? After all, he was not an authentic slave owner, and Xiao Xian was not sure if he was the same as other slave owners. Now, he would not cut the line between him and the beetle. When Xiao Xian looked over, the beetle had just pushed a snowball over the sand ridge, and the snowball rolled down the steep slope of the sand dune. When it rolled past Xiao Xian reached out to block it. Just after the breakthrough, Xiao Xian did not control the strength used to block it, and the snowball in his hand cracked. There was a lot of sand on the snowball, and the surface of the snowball could not be seen, but after it cracked, Xiao Xian found that there was a small lizard hidden in the snowball. Looking at the lizard that was no longer moving in the snowball, Xiao Xian looked doubtfully at the blue beetle running down the sand dune. When did this thing start killing lizards? Did the recipe change? Shaking his head, Xiao Xian did not continue to study it. Looking at the sky, Xiao Xian got up and stretched his limbs. Although there was still some tingling in his body, he could clearly feel the strength. He adjusted his body slightly and wanted to look up and scream, but he held back. This place was not suitable. Let's go back. With that, Xiao Xian swung his legs and ran over the sand dune, running into the snow. He did not ride the eagle, but ran back completely on two legs. He could feel the improvement of his strength, the change in his body's strength, and the majestic power in his body. As he ran, he could feel the changes in his body more clearly. Chapter 326. After Xiao Xian returned to the Luoye city station, he asked Xueqi to pass the message that he wanted to talk to Luoye city's king, Su Luan. Knowing that Xiao Xian wanted to talk to Su Luan about Lei and Tua, Xueqi agreed. He could still help with this. From the beginning, Xiao Xian rarely saw the king. The kings of the cities were not like the other small slave owners, who went to the Colosseum pit to gamble all day long. For the king, fighting in the Colosseum pit was simply shameful. The only thing that could match them was the huge Colosseum. The fighting beasts used for the Colosseum in Luoye City were in the other direction of the station, separated from the fighting beasts of the small slave owners. Every day, there were people who trained them. Because of the wind, people and beasts in the upwind could not smell the thick bloody smell, but if they walked over, it would be obvious. Xueqi went to Su Luan's side and came back not long after. "Father is busy. He said he won't see you," Xueqi helplessly told Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian frowned. Su Luan did not want to see him. He originally wanted to talk to Su Luan about what to do if he met Lei and Tua in the Colosseum, but now it seemed that this road was blocked. Looking at Xiao Xian's reaction, Xueqi continued. Although my father won't see you, I told him about Lei and Tuo. My father said that as long as you can beat the Baishur city's fighting beasts, he will solve the other things. You don't have to worry about Baishur's side making things difficult. Seeing that Xiao Xian did not speak, Xueqi thought that Xiao Xian had given up. After all, it was the Colosseum. It was not something that ordinary people could go down to fight. Even the slaves who went down were the slave owner's right-hand men. Every year, more than half of the people who went down could not come out again. Last year, when Dao Yu went down, many people were not optimistic. Many people saw him as a joke. They bet on Luoya City's fighting beasts to win, but did not think that Dao Yu could come out alive. It was simply a direct slap in the face of Luoya City's people. He heard that afterward, Su Luan also sent people to assassinate Dao Yu. Unfortunately, it was not successful. Instead, he was often assassinated by people over there. Alas, forget it. Su Luan said, if it were me, I wouldn't have come here. I'll go, Xiao Xian said. It's good that you know. If you go, you'll lose your life. What did you say? Xueqi picked his ear, looking at Xiao Xian, and asked with uncertainty. I said I'll go. I'll have to trouble you to talk to the Luoya king again. Xiao Xian said. Xueqi's face was hard to understand and had an expression of you idiot, but seeing that Xiao Xian really made a decision, he no longer tried to persuade him. He sighed in his heart. The people of the tribe are really a bunch of people who want to die. However, let me say this first. Although Father said before that if you can defeat the White Stone City's battle beasts, everything will be easy, but he may not really agree to let you go on stage. You know, we don't get along well with the people of Baishur City. Last year we lost a game. Father is angry in his heart. This year, he will definitely send more powerful slaves down, or directly let his riding beast go down. Otherwise, if we lose again, he will be angry. Well, I know. If he was rejected again, Xiao Xian could only think of another way. Can't you predict? Can you predict what will happen after the Colosseum opens? Xueqi asked. Xiao Xian shook his head. He tried, but he couldn't. What came out was a mess, not a knot, indicating that he couldn't divine this matter. However, Xiao Xian always felt that something would happen. This feeling made Xiao Xian feel very powerless. It was like being in a thick fog, seemingly aware of something in front of him, but unable to see clearly. Xueqi once again entered the two-story building where Su Luan was. He originally thought that Su Luan would once again reject him, but to Xueqi's surprise, Su Luan actually agreed. He also said that when the time came, he would arrange for Xiao Xian to go on stage depending on the situation. This time, Xueqi couldn't guess his father's thoughts. Xiao Xian also couldn't see Su Luan's intentions, but the Colosseum would open tomorrow. Lei and Tuo would most likely be arranged by the people of Baishur City. If he wanted to save them, he could either rob them in advance, or directly fight, and then use the manpower of the Luoya City King to sweep away the trouble. Both were risky, so he could only act according to the circumstances. Before that, he had to prepare more. That afternoon, Xiao Xian stayed in the house most of the time. Xueqi asked the slaves around what Xiao Xian did. The slaves couldn't say why. They only said that Xiao Xian came out a few times, as if he was looking for something. After picking it up, he went back. What did he pick up? Xueqi asked. The slave who was asked carefully thought about it and replied, it's like a branch? Or a stone? Then he gestured. Xueqi was disappointed to let the slave leave. He wanted to ask Xiao Xian what he was doing, but then he remembered that Xiao Xian said today that he shouldn't bother him. After 2 steps, Xueqi turned again. He still wanted to see how the clothes for tomorrow were prepared. Tomorrow was an important day. No one knew what Xiao Xian was doing, and no one in the station cared. Except for the people patrolling around, the focus was on the Colosseum. The next day, the Luoya City team set out from the station to the Colosseum. Luoya City King Su Luan was still sitting on his riding beast, but this time, he was not alone. He was also holding a woman, and the two people showed intimacy. Although Xiao Xian couldn't see clearly because of the curtain, he could tell what was happening just by listening to the sounds. The woman was from Xueqi City, the half-sister of the current Xueqi king. He didn't know if the two people hooked up after coming here, or if they had been in contact for a long time. There were also intermarriages between the cities. The communication between the slave owners was generally good, except for when they became enemies. Xueqi saw his father holding another woman intimately, showing quite calmness. Anyway, it was not the first time. If he could have a bigger riding beast, he would certainly take the beautiful female slave he had just enslaved to do the same thing. No, the female slave's grade was too low. Today, it would be too shameful to take her with him, not worthy of his identity as a young master. A few days ago, the Skywheel City girl who lost to him in a gambling fight was good. Her temper was the same as their Skywheel City's Skywheel pillar, full of thorns. Or the one in Red Star City. It was still not suitable. That woman did not look good. Xiao glanced at Xueqi's fanciful expression and focused his attention on the slave owners of the other cities. After entering the city, he clearly felt that the atmosphere was different from usual. There was a kind of forbearance eagerness. The little slave owners who were arrogant and domineering in the past few days were very well behaved today. The Skywheel City girl who pulled out a knife against Xiao and Xueqi a few days ago looked very quiet today. When they were close to the Colosseum, Xiao saw the people of Baishur City. He did not see Lei and Tuo, but there was a big box in the team over there. He didn't know if the person was locked in that wooden box. Unfortunately, there were too many people here. Xiao could not find a chance to move the box. The people of Luoye City and Baishur City were full of gunpowder when they met. If it were not for the arrival of Rock Tomb City, they would probably do a warm-up first. In the team of Rock Tomb City, on the huge riding beast, Xiao also saw an acquaintance. Although he had not seen him for a few years, his shiny golden hair was too eye-catching. Xueqi, the slave owner that Xiao met when he was looking for Yan Shuo, was also one of the young masters of Rock Tomb City. As usual, if the people of the three major cities came, they had priority. The people of the other cities naturally had to give way first. At this time, no one noticed that when Xueqi's riding beast passed by, Dao Yu, who was standing on the Baishur King's riding beast, slightly bowed his head, as if to salute. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.